Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. I'm wearing a Quest 3, and everyone out there in the audience get that intro. And what do we have today?
Yeah, they all got that intro. So today we're going to talk about 8 separate topics. We're going to talk about SteamVR seeing near record usage in December. So PC VR is being used a lot too, not just standalone. We'll talk about Somnium VR1, the European wide field of view PC VR headset. It has started shipping to the US, but they have announced that there are price increases incoming. So good news and bad news there. Topic 3 will be the discontinuation of Quest Pro. Meta said at Connect that it would discontinue Quest Pro by the end of the year or when stock ran out, whichever came first. The year ended and Quest Pro is now discontinued. We will then talk about BodyLink. BodyLink is a Kickstarter body tracking camera for TV games and VR. We'll move on then to talk about the Nvidia news.
We
So
have
they
we have a couple of people saying our audio is cutting in and out.
Sure. We're saying other people are saying it's good for them. I think we'll continue. We don't see anything
Okay.
on our end. The next section will be the Nvidia section, where I'll double check it again if we want. We'll check it. Everything looks fine. Looks fine on the YouTube's end. It's saying audio is coming in healthily. Stream
Yeah,
healthy.
let's keep it going for a few minutes. I'm seeing it's pretty divided out there. It's kind of weird. So let's keep going, I guess.
Sure, it may be something on YouTube's end. It all looks good on our end. So we will then talk about the NVIDIA news. So NVIDIA had a huge CES conference. They talked about their new graphics cards, which we will discuss, and we'll also discuss GeForce Now coming to Quest 3, Pico, and Apple Vision Pro's web browsers. So Xbox Cloud Gaming is already on Quest. Now you'll also be able to have NVIDIA's GeForce Now. We'll then talk about a story we just put up on UploadVR.com, and that is a Florida judge using Quest 3 in a courtroom. So that's a possible first in the United States, and we'll talk about the implications that may have on the use of virtual reality recreations. We will finish off by talking about Sony's standalone headset. It was announced at last year's CES 1 year ago. We tried it in the summer. Now it has a name. XYN, pronounced Zin, and that's a brand that Sony is now using for its entire kind of enterprise creativity, spatial AR VR ventures, which includes a new Mocopi Pro, a high-end version of their body tracking kit. So a bit of a strange branding decision there from Sony, and it's still unclear exactly what they're doing with that headset, but we'll discuss the hands-on that our Don Hopper had at CES, as well as our thoughts on Sony's strategy here.
Yeah, that last section of the show should probably take up a big chunk of time on the audio podcast and for your viewing out there. So hopefully those last two subjects, take up a good hour. I don't know. Hopefully it's less than that. But the VR in court subject, I talked to the lawyer involved in the defense case there, the one who basically made the case for bringing a headset into the courtroom. So it'll be fun to get into that in detail with our audience here. And then, the last subject there with Don going and checking out the headset that I tried last year. And I'm sure people are going to want to just break that down in every way, shape, and form and really get into that subject in every corner. I'm glad everyone refreshed out there. It sounds like that cleared up the streaming issues for several of the people that were complaining there. And very, very cool to see everyone tune in. We felt lonely in here as David and I got in here. We had been late in posting the YouTube link out there, so there wasn't anybody in the comments yet. And we're like, where is everyone? So it's wonderful to see you all tune in. And again, as usual, let us know where you're tuning in from, what area of the world or where you are in VR. We love seeing that. Let's get into that first subject here, I guess. And I want to tell you, David, at some point I'm going to derail us and tell you about my experiment I did last night in this studio, and I'm doing it a little bit right now. But have you used the Windows 11 multitasking? Because it is really amazing when you use it with this studio.
Yeah, I've used it. I mean, we discussed that on the week, and I said I tried it. I did. It's great. The latency is low. The quality is high. I'm very, very impressed by it personally.
Specifically the triple monitor setup. You've gone like, I can't remember you talking about how great that is, but like I was really messing with the multi-monitor arrangements you could have in that setup. And I even I got into mixed reality mode here in the studio, David, where everything, I was still active here, my hand movements were all conveying straight to the TV out there, but I was straight in pass-through mode. And it was wild that I had three windows here, was showing to the audience exactly as you intended here. And I also had the view of my room. It was wild to have all that together now running on Meta Horizon OS. And just want to, I don't know if you intended for it to work that way, and it worked as well as it did. And it was wild.
I think that's just how the pass-through pause functionality of Quest works. So you double tap the side of your headset on Quest 3, you press the action button on Quest 3S, and it does put you into pass-through, but keeps the app running so that you can really quickly switch between them, as far as I can tell. So yeah, it's just all of the system level features coming together, that seamless multitasking that lets you use regular Windows inside apps. We've talked about this before, and it really is true that Quest is becoming a spatial computing platform. And ironically, in some ways, it goes beyond Vision Pro, as we've discussed before, where you can bring up Windows inside VR apps, which you cannot actually do on Apple Vision Pro, with the exception of the Mac Virtual Display if you turn on a specific developer option.
Yeah, I got as far as installing Parallels last night to see what I could do with Parallels on Mac, and that was quite a journey. But let's get through this topic because I want to get to the courtroom thing, and I want to get to the Sony hands-on. And I'm seeing everyone out there. There's a couple people watching us from various places in VR, people chilly out there all over the United States and Canada. And yeah, to anyone in Los Angeles, be safe. That was my experiment last night, David, with the triple monitor setup. Was I wanted to see if I could be like the full newsman setup here, and I actually had Google Maps on this TV for our viewers out there, and I could mouse along it and move around Google Maps because I talked to a family out there as well as VR developers who have houses and property in the area or live in the area and wanted to know where the map ended, where the fire line and where the evacuations actually were in the Los Angeles area. And I'm in New York on the other end of the United States, and I'm realizing everyone here has no idea what the geography of California is, and I'm sure you don't either, even further out from the United States. And I'm thinking like, could is this actually a conversation we could have with our audience where it's like, oh yeah, this is the Los Angeles area. This is actually a large distance between this place and this place, and it was wild yesterday to see. Like I saw people trying to search Threads, Twitter, uh, get all the blue sky info that they could, and it feels like a lot of those communication lines have broken down over the exodus from Twitter and stuff. And it was just tough yesterday. There was a lot of people distracted and worried about the fires out in the Los Angeles area. And I spent a lot of the time looking at the news feeds and trying to dissect it, and just realizing how many people out there were in that boat at the same time was uh, scary. So I'm thinking a lot about the people out there in California, the sudden fires out there in the middle of January is very, very scary. So that's in real life situations. We don't typically talk about that in VR very often, but I saw it in our comments and thought I should address it. And let's move on, David.
Yeah, it's terrible to see, and our thoughts are definitely with anyone who's affected by that, as well as anyone who has family members affected by that. Before we move on to our first topic, there is a question that we get often that's asking in the comments here, is a question from KC Chiefs Production asking where are the new meta avatars. So there, one thing I would point out is that the majority of apps that use meta avatars haven't updated yet, right? If you go into Golf Plus, you're still going to see these old avatars. And the reality is that it takes time to upgrade avatars. That time we unfortunately at the moment do not have. As I've sort of said before, we built this studio back in a time when VR was a lot less active as an industry, where you could go days without there being significant VR news. And those days were downtime, and we could use that on all sorts of side projects, such as building the studio. the reality is that the market we're in today, and this is a great thing, as someone who is, very much so into VR and AR success, it's a great thing that the market today is so vibrant that we're seeing major announcements, not just every day, but sometimes every few hours. We're at the point where we have to be like, do we cover this? Do we have time to cover this? This is a really rapidly moving industry. We're unfortunately a very small team. And if you want to help us be able to do more, if you want to let us cover more of this industry and have more side projects, please become a member on UploadVR.com, or even better, if you're able to afford that, a patron, and we can continue to make those sort of priority decisions. So we'll have to by March, just as Golf Plus has to by March, and the other apps that use meta avatars, because that's when they will deprecate it at the end of March, these old avatars. So we'll have to make some time at that point.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if the best way to motivate David and myself and the team to get those avatars done at this point is to become a member and become a patron. It literally, we see it come in, we see them that it being added to the roles here, the membership roles, and it makes a huge difference to just know that there's people who want to see more of what we do. And I know how hard it is to make a subscription out there like that. It's not easy. So we know how deeply meaningful it is for every one of those people who have supported us. Thank you so much for your support, both YouTube and on UploadVR.com. Yeah, become a member, support our work. And I like that David has a deadline in his head now, and he knows it. You know it. We all know it. We're not going to bug him about it anymore. But do give him that motivation by becoming a member.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really just a matter of motivation. It's also the fact that once that money means that we can pay freelancers to take on certain, reviews and news tasks that then let us spend more time on other things. It also means that in the future, when that membership does get to a certain level, we can bring on more staff, either part-time or full-time, that then does the same effect that those freelancers should be. So if you're interested in what are the specifics there, that's kind of how that dynamic works in a small team like this.
Do members have a place where they can put notes when they become a member? I can't remember if you made that as a feature. Like, I became a member because is that something they can do?
Not as far as I'm aware, but you are able to get a member badge on comments on UploadVR.com. You can also contact us and let us know about that. We obviously, or just type it in the chat here.
So I see Alan asking if they can support with 3D art. I appreciate that, but we do not accept NFTs here at UploadVR. And then I see MM saying, can you guys discuss Play for Dream MR headset? I think we'll probably get that next week. I think that's probably going to be lining up the way things are going. We have Don Hopper at CS right now, and the one thing from his sort of stream of information that he's sending into us that we can go through is that last subject that we're going to get into today with Sony's. So we've been derailed fully here and let a lot of people. I think it was good that we got derailed here because we have more than 60 people now tuned into the show, and
sure.
I think hopefully we'll see a couple hundreds by the time we get into those that last subject there.
Sure. So let's get into the show. Our first topic: SteamVR saw near record usage in December when adjusting for Chinese users. So we discussed last week how the success of VR over Christmas 2024 was quite obvious in that the Meta Horizon app needed to set up Quest headsets was the #1 free iPhone app on Christmas Day. In addition, we were seeing on Amazon Quest 3 outselling Quest 3S, outselling traditional games consoles. There were really high sales numbers there. It was best selling in some categories. Strong indications there that a lot of standalone headsets were being shipped. Today, we're going to talk about to what extent, how many of those standalone headsets are also being used on PC. And there's a good indication that a lot of them have started to be over Christmas. You have seen an increase in the usage on SteamVR that suggests that, some PC VR headset owners are bringing their headset out of the closet or cupboard to use it over the holiday period when they actually have time. They've taken a few weeks off work or at least a week, and they're taking those headsets out and using them, as well as new buyers of Quest 3 and Quest 3S and other headsets, connecting them to SteamVR to see what's possible. So here is our chart that weights for the number of Chinese users on Steam. The reason we noticed this was years ago, sometimes you would see an anomalous reduction that seemed very hard to explain from month to month in the number of Steam users using a VR headset, according to Valve's data. And what we noticed when we looked into this in more detail was that this would always correlate with the number of Chinese language users. Steam also breaks down the user base by language. So what we've done with the data that we've been collecting since Valve changed the data collection method to scan your SteamVR logs for any headset connected in the past month, and that was back at the start of 2020, as you can see in the chart on the screen. Or if you're listening, you can go to UploadVR.com and look for the article where this chart is embedded. So once we weight this to factor out the Chinese language user base, you do see a steady increase in the percentage of Steam users using a VR headset that has now come to its second highest ever in December 2024. There was a point in 2022, during the summer, I think, of 2022, where it was higher, but we're seeing that kind of second highest now. We will be very curious to monitor this data throughout 2025 and see, was this just a holiday blip? Was this people having some time off work to play PC VR? Or is this a new resurgence of PC-based VR in an era where you have these high-quality, affordable wireless headsets that with one or two clicks can jump straight into SteamVR?
Ooh, I love this coverage, this trend line, the detail that David has been trying to pull from this very small number on a very very specific place on the internet. I see that John out there has become a member, and then I see also that Steve is a new member. I see Biggs out there, Mindweaver. Thank you all, and yes, hit that like button as well. It means thank you all for becoming members, and thank you for that support. And yeah, and David, thank you for all your work last year and the previous years building to where we are this year. He's not. It's every day. It is an onslaught of news every single day that we have to deal with, and it's overwhelming to try to kind of figure out. We saw a company, what was it, that raised billions of dollars, or claimed to have raised billions of dollars in funding, and we have to decide whether we're going to cover that, because we have to question, where did the funding come from? Was it actual dollars of investment? Is there some kind of crypto version, some amount of that money crypto related? Like, there's a long list of questions that we go through on every single story we try to put in front of our viewers, our readers, and it's a lot of work to decide what we're actually going to put that time into. And appreciating so much that our audience recognizes that, and we get to have this discussion with a group of people each week who really recognize the amount of work we're putting in. So thank you for that, and hopefully we'll have. I want to say that hopefully we'll have some member streams this year. I think we're going to do some more intimate discussions with just hopefully devs or experts that we can interview in here, and just start with members and then go more public, I think, for everyone. So I want to do that this year, but no firm promises yet. But it just means so much to see your support. All right, David, anything else on this subject? Any comments out there you want to address?
Yeah, there's definitely a few comments here. So Admiral Snackbar asks the obvious question, why do Chinese users skew the data? So there are two reasons here. One is that the Chinese VR market is kind of parallel to ours. You have most of the Western companies aren't officially available there. So, you can't officially get a Valve Index or a Quest. Sure, there are resellers just like there are for any product, but that means you're not getting, an official warranty. So people are much less incentivized to buy. They have a market that is actually much more focused on some of the use cases that are starting to emerge now in the Western market, like media viewing. One of the Chinese tech companies that is often called the Netflix of China is actually one of the companies that makes one of the most popular headsets there. So they have their equivalent of that there for years, that service available with downloads, whereas, in the Western world, Netflix itself doesn't have an app available on Vision Pro, works in the Quest browser, doesn't support downloads. So there are some differences that mean that trying to compare the number of sort of PC VR users isn't really fair. The other huge difference is that from the reporting I've read, a lot of the times when you see a surge in Chinese users are these openings of Steam internet cafes. Again, Steam, technically, the Western version of Steam that this is collecting data from shouldn't be available in China. But of course, people use VPNs, and these sort of semi black market internet cafes pop up. And it's not really fair to say, oh, because a bunch of Chinese internet cafes open, but they don't have VR headsets on it, then the adoption of PC VR has gone down. So it's a little bit of a crude method, but for a fair comparison that doesn't have all of that factored in, and we wouldn't have to add all those caveats every time, this really just makes the most sense. And you see the most stability in this data over time. Without this, you see really strange, anomalous changes that don't seem to correlate to anything. The other question I have here is, well, it's a statement actually. James Howe saying that they got a Rift CV1, an original Oculus Rift, the day it came out. Always wanted PC VR to do well, but feel very little bringing me back. I'm curious, James, what headset you use now and what kind of content you use now. And there's another question we have here from Unique saying, please talk about what we're all here for, the Sony headset. So you may have missed the start of the show where I ran down our order of topics, but this is topic number 1, and the Sony headset is topic number 8. So we will get there eventually. We'll try to stay on topic and get through the topics we have. Ian laughed there, of course.
Well,
regulars
yeah, James here saying, is there any noise on PSVR exclusives coming over to PC, given that flat titles have and the headset is supported now with caveats? Maybe we'll talk about that in the Sony section later, but that is related to all the Sony stuff. We're in a certain phase of the year here, and gosh, it is going to be a year unlike any other. There's no model we can go off of for what is going to happen this year. A lot of things that we expected to happen in 2022 ended up happening in 2023 and 2024, and now there's this buildup of hype for VR as these operating systems add on new partners, as all the manufacturers get in line to ship tens of millions of headsets, basically. So that's the phase we're in the next 2 years of tens of millions of headsets. Hopefully being shipped by multiple manufacturers, and it seems like the market is readying for that right now.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Right now, there's only indications that one company is going to be on the scale of tens of millions, and that's Meta. The other headsets we're seeing are very much so sort of focused on quality and bringing out 4K micro OLED, whether it be Samsung or Sony, as we'll discuss later. And they can't even make that many, never mind sell them at the prices. We'll certainly have to see what happens. So when it comes to this story, the percentage of Steam users, we have another little chart here that really puts this into context, because a lot of the time if you read media coverage of gaming or technology in general, you might imagine that VR is this tiny niche. PC VR is this even smaller niche within that niche. But, Mac gaming, people would call a niche, but they would maybe assume that's a bigger niche. And Steam Deck, I'm sure a lot more people have a Steam Deck than a VR headset on a PC, right? And I mean, everybody has their RTX 4090, of course. Who doesn't have their RTX 4090? It's so common. We're going to have a billion articles on this, but VR, that's just some silly niche. But when we look at the Steam data, that's not true. VR is bigger than Mac gaming. It's almost the size of all of Linux gaming, which includes Steam Deck. So if you take out the people who are using Linux on a non-Steam Deck, realistically, PC VR is bigger than Steam Deck. People using VR on their PC is more popular than a Steam Deck, and it's about twice as popular as owning an RTX 4090, which people talk about as if everyone and their dog owns. And the really interesting context is to put it next to 4K primary monitor. So PC VR is about half as popular as owning a 4K primary monitor, which you would think, right, that any real modern 2025 PC gamer that really cares about PC gaming is obviously going to have a 4K monitor, right? These numbers are really fascinating to me. This chart is more interesting than the last one. You're muted, Ian.
Sorry. Yeah, stack these two numbers together is what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, take the VR headset number and put it on top of the Linux, including Steam Deck number, and you have a number that is comparable to the 4K primary monitor setup, which is very interesting to consider this scenario of people walking around with their Steam Deck, or keeping it on their side and having a virtual display of what's on the Steam Deck with them wherever they go as as competition for 4K primary monitor, right? There's a threshold to come over where you've got a 350 Steam Deck, $500 headset, $800. How does that compare to going and getting a $800 or $600 display?
Yeah, it's fascinating to think, as you say, that you kind of have this new idea of what PC gaming is, that people would assume again is such a niche, but is actually bigger than the kind of maximalist view of what current PC gaming is. So it's just another indication of what we talk about all the time on this show, which is that VR today is a real consumer market being used by millions of people. If you take this number and you compare it to the number of active Steam users, according to Valve, you're talking about like 3 million or so PC VR users. This isn't something that's only being, used by a couple of enthusiasts. That idea of this market is tiny. And of course, when we talk about this, we have to point out that the vast majority of VR usage isn't on PC. So this is only PC VR. When you add in Quest Standalone and PlayStation VR 2, this is a lot of bigger market than the regular gaming and tech media typically assumes.
But so you're always good to point out when I say open, when I use the term open imprecisely. But what I love about the chart and what it points out when we talk about PC in general, we're talking about an open area of computing. OpenXR is now standard on PC across both PC platforms, all PC platforms. And this is a window into what openness looks like, or some level of openness, even though it's inside Steam, right? Like we go back to that old argument of Oculus versus Steam that happened in the early days of PC VR. But it's still an indicator here to me of, you see this Linux portion of this chart, you can start seeing that you can actually spin up VR without an operating system if you really want, and roll your own operating system and bring your own tools and put together your own rig. And like that's where I always want to point out that exists underneath all the platforms that have been built on top of all this stuff. So sorry, my long-winded little like let's always recognize that open source and open personal computing is a goal of some of the people out there. And some people, they just want the cheapest headset on the market. That's all they care about. They're going to go get what's available to them. Some people are actually waiting for an open headset or an open solution that brings them all the graphics power they want from the 4090 or some RTX unit, and they also get to bring in their Steam Deck, and they get to they want everything, and they know that it's only on PC, and they've been missing that for years.
Yeah, the all of the above option, and of course, as you point out, the interesting use case of using your Steam Deck and your VR headset as the monitor for it, right? Having MetaQuest HDMI link to turn that Steam Deck experience into an enormous cinema screen that is completely portable, that can be all fit in a backpack. So let's have a look at the how each headset contributes to that overall number. And I want to be actually very clear just before we move on that the number here is not weighted for Chinese users. These are just the raw numbers from Valve. There's no trickery going on here of any sort. This is the actual reality. And let's move on and see how the different headsets make this up. So not much has really changed since last time, except on this list at least, Quest 3S is now used more than PlayStation VR 2. The problem is, though, if you've seen our previous coverage, that some of the Quest 3S usage is in Quest 3, specifically for virtual desktop, for example, that it's been confirmed that it will show up as Quest 3 if you connect your Quest 3S to your PC using virtual desktop. So what we can say then is that on the order of 23% of SteamVR is using Quest 3 family, as in Quest 3 and Quest 3S, which is pretty remarkable, right? That these headsets have only been out 1 year in the case of Quest 3, a few months in the case of Quest 3S, and they're already at almost 1/4 of usage. I think that does show that hardware is still very much so moving on. Hardware is still very much so low-hanging fruit here, and people do want these wireless high quality headsets with, Wi-Fi 6E and ringless controllers and higher bit rate and better codecs than what was possible on Quest 2. People want high quality wireless PC VR. That much is very clear from watching these numbers over time.
We got VR Gamer Dude Don Hopper out there in Las Vegas in a different time zone. So he's trying to adjust his mental model of the world because he's on a different side of the planet. So thank you, Don, for tuning in at your hour out there. And I'm seeing all the comments streaming in. And you brought up this chart, David. I just want to pull up Big Screen Beyond and call out where they've gotten as this little indie company getting up this high on the chart, right? They started to outstrip some of the old HTCs that are no longer sold and haven't been for years. They're really close to the Vive Pro 2 here. And then we've got our later subject here that it's going to surpass at some point here. You've got other things dropping off the market. So just want to note that out. And when we talk about those PC enthusiasts, you think about Mokopi. We were going to talk about that during the Sony section of the show. But you can imagine 12 points of tracking paired with a Big Screen Beyond, as well as a pair of controllers in your hands for index controllers. And you've got a complete body tracking system there that is very expensive, but hypothetically very accurate and could just be a really must buy for some of those people who spend a lot of hours in VR chat. So we'll have to see how that works over time. But I need to bring that up as we're talking about this and we go from topic to topic, but it's relevant, right?
Sure. I mean, Big Screen Beyond for a tiny company that was just a software app to get there is very impressive to be at 0.48%. But we actually haven't seen massive growth there in a while. There was a surge in the sort of second half of last year, but it's kind of settled down at 0.5% of usage, 1 in 200 of SteamVR users. And the same has actually started to happen for PlayStation VR 2. When it first came out, we saw this very small surge. By it, I mean the PC VR adapter for PlayStation VR 2. But it doesn't seem to have been widely adopted, right? In theory, it's pretty much the same price as a Quest 3. It's on the same order, once you get your adapters and cables. It offers that kind of, really punchy OLED colors and vibrant contrast image, but it just doesn't seem like it's getting anywhere near the same velocity as Quest 3S or even Pico 4, which isn't available in the US or Canada. And I think I know the answer to this, and it's going to be what I've kind of just said before, and it's wireless. I think more people want wireless VR than enthusiasts that don't care about wireless VR think. So, I had a conversation with someone about this recently who was saying, I've been in VR for years and I bought headsets back when they didn't even have wireless options and I've never really cared about the cable. But the thing about that is that then you are by definition someone who doesn't care about the cable. And while these tethered headsets were the only things available, be it the Rift or the Vive, or the Valve Index, millions of people sat on the sidelines saying, that's cool, but I don't know if I want one with a cable. I'll wait till it's wireless. I'm sure the technology will be just around the corner. And we thought back at the time that it was going to be these, expensive 60 gigahertz adapters that you stick on your wall and have to have line of sight to. It didn't turn out to be that at all. It turned out to be that standalone headsets on your regular Wi-Fi network would use video streaming compression and turn into PC VR headsets with a couple of clicks. And that means that not only do you get wireless, but because of the economics involved here, where these platform-owned headsets are subsidized, you actually get wireless VR for cheaper than you get wired VR, which is bizarre to say, but that's the reality we're in. So you have not only do you get an experience free from tethers, but it's also cheaper, and that's just what the market wants. I think it's very, very clear that the number of people who are okay with cables already bought into VR, and a significant percentage, if not the vast majority, of the growth that's being seen in VR is people joining who would not have bought back when it required a cable.
Wow, we've got the war going on over cables in the audience, and it's so hysterical to me to see us focusing on that right now. And I get it, and right now I'm cabled. I'm tethered to the wall because I want to have a solid internet connection in this house and not hear you blame my internet for me cutting in and out, not hearing
Working.
our audience cut in and out. I want to know when our audience says that we seem to be cutting out, that it's not my internet on my house doing it. And so I wired myself to the internet. But
And
point
last week
being,
it worked perfectly, didn't it? And it's working
I'm
more
wired.
perfectly today.
Yes, right. So David's got two proofs that he was previously right that my internet was
Well, not
horrible, and
it's not your
yeah,
internet. It's your mesh network. It's something to do with the routers.
I you're right. All right, but I've also been in different rooms, right, and the whatever. All right, but the point is, what I've been messing with around my house, David, is like messing with all the latencies because, like, yeah, wireless is great, but if you want to move a 500 gigabyte file or whatever from or stack of files from this place to this place in your home, you want to go.
You just muted yourself with. That's very accidental, just swinging out into the mute button.
Yeah. No, you want physical wired access for a lot of tasks around the house. And so it's just hysterical to me when we talk about losing the wire. You also want to bring it back on the other side of the flip over to mobile operating systems to just increase performance, to have a great picture, to not have a delay as you transport 50 gigabytes around your network.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it feels like when we're having these discussions that you've arrived here from like 10 years ago. When the era of, these headsets that we're using have Wi-Fi 6E. I don't think I've had any problems in a while. The next era of headsets are going to have Wi-Fi 7. I think, from what I'm aware, that will be definitely a feature of the next headsets. You're talking about multi-gigabit bandwidth from these devices on this new protocol now. I think we're entering an era where the vast majority of consumers will grow up not knowing what an Ethernet cable is, other than for very rare scenarios. I just don't think this need for wireless, for being wired, really exists in 2025. Sure, you're going to want to have your PC wired so that you don't have two hops of wireless. Sure, but if you look at using a Pico 4 Ultra or Quest 3 or a Quest 3S with a Wi-Fi 6E router, with the AV1 codec, with virtual desktop, it's so good that even as a compression snob, I don't really see a need to ever go back to wired for the majority of cases. There is one caveat I'll give. There's one caveat, and we'll talk about it later on in the Nvidia new graphics card section.
I don't know. I'm getting like you're not wrong, David, but I'm always imagining the people that don't have a clue what is wrong with their internet, what is wrong with their devices, and they can't diagnose whether it was their Wi-Fi network, the internet going out, what is it. And the thing that's happening right now with my personal devices is I'm streaming when I get this whole setup running right. My Mac virtual display is streaming something like 10K, like 10,000 in one direction pixels from my monitor to from my computer to my headset. And then on top of that, I'm perhaps having Steam Link over here as a second local streaming Wi-Fi solution. And I am one person on my network. My point is, what happens when you have 6 people on that network and 2 of them are trying to stream 2 Mac virtual displays on the same area? Like, what happens when 2 or 3 people try to do all this?
So the great thing about Mac Virtual Display, which is my favorite thing about it, is that it doesn't go through your Wi-Fi router. It creates a direct connection between the Mac and the headset, at least for MacBooks. I'm not aware of exactly how it works when it comes to desktop Macs. I'm sure maybe it does go through there, but with a desktop Mac, you're going to likely have that Ethernet wired in the first place. But again, some of the times you talk about this, I think some of the audience have joked about it. It sounds like, you've come from the past. You've come from 10 years ago where, oh, what if there's 6 people in the Wi-Fi? A modern router can handle that easily. I'm just at
You're right, David, but this is
64 devices connected right now to my Wi-Fi router.
64 devices. And how big is your home, and how thick are your walls, and how many of them are wired, right?
Sure.
Like we go down that whole list, and that's not the average Joe. And some people are living 10 years ago. They are using that router from 2005, and they can't understand why this isn't working for them in 2025. Brandon Jones, happy to support you all. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our members. We see a lot of people joining. I see Don out there thanking you as well in the text comments. Oh, wow. It means a lot to see all these people join today. And as you and I get heated and we go fired up about wireless versus wired, it's funny to see all the support, enjoying this conversation, because I'm sure you enjoy some of this in your personal life. You're those sorts of people that I do have a wireless backhaul on all of my network now, guys. Okay, I went to that step to solve this issue, and it killed me. I hated it. I hated every minute of it, and I know I loved it. I loved wiring it all up, but I also hated it. All right, let's move on, David.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is, at my parents' house, it is big. It is in the countryside. It does have thick concrete walls. I did set up for them a mesh network with, Ethernet backhaul, and I think they have in total well over 100 devices connected, and everything just seems to work. So I agree with you 100%. If someone is using an old router, that's going to be a problem, but I think it's going to be a lot easier for them to just buy a new router on Amazon or ask their ISP for a new one or move to a new ISP and get a free new one than it is going to be to start plugging in their phone via Ethernet,
My internet is fixed, okay? I wired into it and now I'm tethered. Okay, guys, I have to be tethered into the future with you, okay, in order to enjoy a night. I'm not gonna go. All right, whatever. All right, let's move on, David. I'm mad now. All right.
I saw a commenter that said that they really appreciated that you did do that for them, so you're getting appreciation, and that's good.
All right, over 100 devices connected. I love everyone chiming in with their device count on their Wi-Fi networks now. All right, yeah, you guys are proving my point as much as you're also proving, like think about that, right? Of all the grandmas out there with 100 devices connected to their network because their grandson hooked up a dozen cameras to the Wi-Fi router and they're using whatever. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about Somnium VR1. If you're not aware of what this headset is, here is an image of me wearing it back at their launch event. It is a European wide field of view PC VR headset. So it uses the same 2.9K LCD panels as Pimax Crystal, and they have QD, a quantum dot layer for better color, as well as mini LED backlighting for local dimming. So you kind of get like a near OLED level of contrast with some blooming limitations, as well as near OLED level of punchy colors, but without the issues of regular OLED that include kind of that Mura effect where you get this fixed pattern noise, and without the incredibly high cost of micro OLED, as well as the fact that current micro OLED panels are very small. They are micro displays, so it's hard to get a wide field of view. So the kind of pitch with this headset, and it's part of the reason why it is so relatively bulky looking, is that it offers, according to Somnium, and I did confirm this somewhat when I went there, the widest undistorted field of view in a consumer VR headset. So this is designed for PC VR enthusiasts who have a racing sim setup or a flight sim setup, who say, my priority as a PC VR user right now is not on getting the highest possible resolution in the slimmest possible headset. Instead, it's about having an expansively wide field of view, as well as, of course, this thing in its variants having eye tracking, hand tracking, and mixed reality. But I did say there in its variants. So when they first opened pre-orders for this thing, they had a bunch of different variants, 7 regular consumer variants of all kinds. And the base model didn't have eye tracking, and some did have eye tracking, and some did have mixed reality pass-through, and some did have hand tracking. And so you had this weird matrix of options. What they've done now, as they've announced that they have started shipping to customers that pre-ordered in the US, is simplified this lineup significantly. So instead of a bunch of different variants that are hard to understand which is which, they only have 3: Visionary, Titan, and Ultimate. Visionary has eye tracking, Titan has eye tracking and hand tracking, and Ultimate has those 2 features plus pass-through. So they've discontinued the base model. People who pre-ordered it will still get it, but they're not selling the one without eye tracking anymore. This means, though, that the entry price for Somnium VR1 for that visionary model with eye tracking is now €2,500. And on January 16th, they intend to announce increased pricing. So, this is another relatively small company. They are in Europe and doing a lot of their assembly, manufacturing, and QA in Europe, which is obviously going to lead to a lot higher costs than if you're doing all of this in China. And I think they're going to catch a lot of flack for this, because that is a steep price for something that is just the headset. It also needs, of course, if you want to take full advantage of this and have controllers, SteamVR base stations and Valve Index controllers, if that's what you want to do, have a tracked controller setup.
So I'll have you take a look through the comments there, see if there's anything to respond to. And I've been looking over them. I'm laughing at all of the people sounding off on the dozens and dozens of devices that they have connected to their local routers. And what is it? I see someone from Sweden tuning in, people noticing that there was no Deckard at CES, even though there was a SteamOS brought to another handheld, which is another big step for Valve on their path. We do need to be moving on here through the show. And I wanted to call out that one comment from someone who said that they read your previous write-up of this headset and they noticed your skepticism in the write-up. And that's just another veiled way of saying, please support our work, because I'm so appreciative of a reader reading exactly what David tried to put into an article, right? Like you're reading the effort we put into and you're noticing it, and we have that full circle feedback loop with our audience. So I appreciate you noticing that David tried to have that level of skepticism.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to the skepticism here, aspheric lenses are very hard to get right. And I have historically and still generally I'm not a huge fan of aspheric lenses, although that's quite a strong generalization. If you don't know what I'm talking about, in general in VR, you will probably have heard of Fresnel lenses of the likes that are in, Quest 2, Quest 1, the original Rift S, Valve Index, and then pancake lenses of the type that are in Quest Pro, Quest 3, Pico 4. And you'll know in general that Fresnel lenses have a longer optical path. So you have these kind of bulkier headsets. And then pancake lenses have a much shorter optical path. So you get slimmer headsets, as well as a sharper and clearer image with a wider eye box. So there are all those advantages of pancake lenses. But there is a third type of lens used in VR headsets that has the same long optical path of Fresnel lenses, in fact, sometimes slightly longer, as well as some of the sharpness benefits of pancake lenses. So it's a strange middle ground. The problem is that aspheric lenses almost always introduce a kind of uncorrectable geometric distortion. I say uncorrectable because companies try very hard to correct it. And every time I try a pre-release headset that uses aspheric lenses, it always has some sort of distortion. And every company says, oh, don't worry, we'll fix that in the firmware down the line. Vario Aero was the best example of this. And sometimes they can get most of it away, but it never really fully goes away. With this headset, there was this kind of strange focus issue where I felt like my eyes were never truly focusing. And we opened up their kind of PC VR tool where there was all of these different sort of lens parameter adjustment settings on the software side. And, I didn't have much time with it. This was back in the summer. It was able to be improved, but it's one of those things where it's possible that if I was able to sit down with this thing for 1 hour and play with the tool that all buyers of this headset, get, it's the software tool required to set it up. If I play with this for an hour, maybe I could get this tuned for my eyes, but that's a lot of tuning. And it just feels like aspheric lenses can just be such divas when pancake lenses just work.
That's a good t-shirt slogan for UploadVR. Good quote from David there. Tanuki Tom, I like his comment or their comment out there. I slammed the door shut on getting a Quest 3 this week despite the enticing software. I have PSVR 2 and Deckard as all I can look forward to in that area. I think that's a very level-headed sort of look at where you are in the upgrade cycle, right? Like that's a reasonable approach to think about where you are and weighing those choices. And I think you're representative of a lot of people out there, Tom. Just waiting out there to see what Valve does and how it delivers its next steps after Valve Index. There's plenty, I think of every Valve Index owner just waiting for Valve to follow it up with, like, Valve to follow up with something new. It's more than zero, the number of people who are just in that Valve camp waiting for them to do something, poke it with the stick.
It's interesting. Sampler 19 is saying that they get the same feeling with the Pimax Crystal Light, which also uses aspheric lenses. The same feeling I was describing of the focus just feeling wrong and off. There's a comment here suggesting that Apple did the best with aspheric lenses. The Apple Vision Pro's lenses are not aspheric. They're a very unique kind of sort of multi-element lens that is kind of this weird convex. It's similar to pancake lens. You can't really call it a pancake lens, but it's essentially, and I'm greatly simplifying, essentially a convex pancake lens. So it's much closer to pancake than it would be to something like aspheric. But I mean, in general, there's a comment here that's kind of saying that it's from James O'Loughlin saying that Meta's pancake lenses must have a patent all over it. I wonder if the partner systems will have them. It's a great question. Will Horizon OS headsets from other companies be able to use them? Because the thing about Quest 3 is that its lenses are just the best by far. There is no other headset that has lenses no other headset that's currently shipping and in people's hands that has the lenses of Quest 3. The Quest 3 lenses are so good that the first time I put it on, I was so confused as to why moving the IPD slider was moving the lenses, but not changing the eye box, which I thought, like, am I sleep deprived? Is there something wrong with my brain right now? Why the lenses are moving, but there's no change in the eye box. It's the only headset that you could set your IPD completely wrong and still have no blur, which is just insane when you think about it. Like, those lenses are so sharp, so clear, have such a wide eye box that they really have set a standard in the industry that no one has yet followed.
Yeah, I noticed, like, when you put on a headset, there's two or three things that can immediately like, that's the first things you notice. You can notice the lenses are bad, or the tracking is bad, are the two like competing things. And you shake your head around a little bit, and then you try to put your finger on why does everything look a little bit funky? And, like, there's plenty of VR headsets out there that they just have bad lenses. They haven't done the work that Meta or Apple have done to develop really just next level lenses that don't have all these various distracting elements. And then also Valve is a supplier of lens technology to others, or I think they tried to be back in the early days of SteamVR. That was one of their pitches, was to supply the lens technology. So, like, there's a lot of custom work that goes into giving you that incredible VR experience you have right from the moment you put that headset on. And then, like, you put on a headset that doesn't have all that custom work, and all you're left with is, why doesn't this feel right? Why does this look so wrong?
No, I strongly agree. It's one of those things that for so long there were always little issues with lenses, and Quest 3s aren't perfect. There are still things that could be improved around glare and reflections, but with Quest 3's lenses, it is at the point where you're like, this is the baseline of what is really great. This is the first time you put this on, and as you say, you're not like thinking about, oh, well, this bit's blurry and this kind of doesn't feel right and this is distorted. And I've just realized, by the way, I've said the word convex like 10 times in a row when I meant to say concave. It's like saying right instead of left. I meant concave, for the record.
Okay, let's move on here, David. We're at an hour on subject 2, and I want to talk about the Quest Pro and why it made my life miserable and why it is dead. No, it's not dead because it made my life miserable, but I have a lot of strong feelings about it, and I don't know. I'm currently waiting on my Quest 2 my replacement Quest 2 to be delivered after Meta accepted that return after it was inoperable. I have a Quest 1 up there that is stuck on an entry screen, and then I have a Quest Pro that only has one controller operational. And these are all of Meta's last generation devices. and they're all in tatters all around me. I'm trying to just keep a little pile of alive Quest devices from the past so that I can look at them in the future and try them out. And I have pretty good confidence that my Rift could probably operate if I go and get the right Windows 10 machine right now. But my Quests, like I have to revive them every 3 months and make sure they're still alive as they die around me. What is going on with Quest Pro, David?
Yeah, my original Oculus Rift is also in a good state, except for, and not to bring it back to the earlier discussion, the cable. The cable is twisted and tattered in so many ways. So I tried so hard to preserve it, but as any PC VR user that uses a tethered headset will know, it's very hard to not it's very hard to keep that cable in a quality condition over time. So the news here is not really news because Meta did announce this at Connect, at its yearly conference, Meta Connect, in September 2024. It announced that by the end of the year, Quest 2 and Quest Pro would be discontinued, taken off the market, or if stock ran out. So whichever happened first. The end of the year, where stock running out. For Quest 2, stock ran out within around a month or so, depending on the region. So it was discontinued, no longer sold by Meta. If you want one, you can get it on eBay or other second-hand marketplaces, but you could not buy it firsthand. Now we come to 2025, and the other condition has happened for Quest Pro. The end of the year happened. Meta is no longer selling this headset. If you go to Meta's website and look for Quest Pro, or go to an old URL that would link to Quest Pro on their site, you see this message alongside an image of Quest 3 and a advertisement essentially for Quest 3 saying, if you want our high-end headset, this is our new high-end headset. So their lineup now is the 128 gigabyte Quest 3S at $300, the 256 gigabyte Quest 3S at $400, and the 512 gigabyte Quest 3 at $500. The affordable headset and the high-end headset. Quest 3 is now their highest end headset, and they no longer sell any headset that has eye tracking, nor face tracking, nor any of the other features of Quest Pro, such as a rear battery.
So there is a big year ahead for Meta to introduce a dev kit or for a partner to bring those features back for Meta in some way, shape, or form. And I don't think they've got any rush on it necessarily to do it fast. They can sort of take their time to do it right. And I think there's a demo coming, right? There's a demo coming where you scan yourself in one room with a headset from Meta. You go into another room with and put on a headset, and the scan you took of yourself in the first room is now visible to other people when you put on the standalone headset in the next room, and then you have a conversation. Like you and I could go into two rooms at a Meta event, scan ourselves with a headset, go into the next room, put the headsets on, and feel like you and I are actually standing there with each other. There is a demo coming from Meta where they do something like that. We don't know what year it's coming, and we don't know on what specific hardware they're going to do it. But Apple Vision Pro beat them to the punch at doing what they basically signaled to us they were going to do 5 years ago, right? They've been telling us they're going to do this for a long time, and Apple pulled it all together and shipped it in Apple Vision Pro at $3,500, where Meta couldn't quite do all of those things at $1,500 with the limited chipset that they shipped on that initial Quest Pro. So Meta has a great chance here to just wow an audience again, wow developers, wow you and me and all the other bloggers out there who have been skeptical. We're not skeptical, but all the bloggers and writers out there who've been skeptical about VR can come in and realize, holy crap, my phone calls will be with VR headsets in the future. That's an opportunity still ahead with the death of Quest Pro.
Yeah, I agree with you. So the idea of Quest Pro, as we heard from Mark Zuckerberg in all of the interviews he gave before the headset, was that it would be this next step in social VR and the next step in telecommunication. The problem, of course, is that the eye tracking and face tracking weren't good enough to drive that. And more importantly, the chipset was not powerful enough to do anything close to photorealistic avatars. It was the kind of avatars that we're using now, where the basicness of the faces didn't really do the face tracking justice at all, compared to, as you say, that completely different experience on Apple Vision Pro, where you have those spatial personas. So, if anyone isn't aware, despite the fact that it was called Quest Pro, and despite the fact that it launched at $1,500, they only cut it down to $1,000 after 4 months. It had a chipset that was essentially just a slightly, and I mean slightly, souped up version of what was in Quest 2. It supported, more cameras in, it supported more RAM, and the RAM moved off for thermal reasons. But it was essentially the same CPU, the same GPU as what we see in the Quest 2 from all the way back in 2020. And obviously what happened is a year later, just 1 year later, Meta comes out with the Quest 3 with twice the GPU power and 30 to 50% more CPU power, as well as like 8 times the NPU power for machine learning tasks. And obviously the Quest 3 does not have eye and face tracking, but it does have the performance. So you have this really weird situation where they sell a headset that has the tracking hardware but not the performance, and a headset that has the performance potentially but not the tracking hardware. And meanwhile, of course, as you say, Apple comes out with their $3,500 Vision Pro and pushes these spatial personas as a software update that does deliver somewhat on the research that Meta had been showing off for years. So when it comes to when is this going to come back, when are we going to see Meta deliver their equivalent of spatial personas, codec avatars, in an actual product? I think it's going to be Quest 4. I think it's very likely that in 2026, we will see a Quest 4 come out near the end of the year that does have eye tracking and either uses the same strategy of Vision Pro, downwards facing cameras just on the near the nose of the headset that both track your hands when they're down low, as well as your lower face, to deliver the same thing alongside, of course, a massive chipset upgrade. I can't see them doing this through a partner first. It would be so weird to say, here's this research that we've been working on for years, and it's coming in the Lenovo headset or the Asus headset. I think it's far more likely that this will just be the flagship new feature of Quest 4.
Yeah, well, I like that you mentioned Lenovo by name, because Lenovo has been running around. That's the manufacturer that's making the third-party Steam Deck, right? So am I right on that, David? Yeah.
Yeah, Lenovo makes everything, right?
And they also made the Rift S, right? So basically, we have proof in this market of them becoming the manufacturing partner when a manufacturer in here didn't want to expend all the resources to manufacture a headset themselves. So I'm just pointing that out there in Valve land as a nice little theory for you to ponder with your copium.
I mean, and they partnered with Google. They were the hardware partner with Google in 2018 for Daydream. They partnered with Google on a bunch of other stuff too. They have, Google Home speakers and smart displays, and they partner with Microsoft on a bunch of PCs, and they partner with Qualcomm. Lenovo, it's a Chinese tech giant that is very good at manufacturing, affordable hardware, and they have no problems with partnering with everyone in the market. I'm pretty sure they partner with Amazon for a bunch of Alexa stuff too. That seems to be their strategy. I think they do understand that their strength is not in software. They don't try to spin up their own platform and convince people to use it. They are very much so focused on the hardware, and that's perfect for what Meta is looking for here.
So I'm trying to piece this picture together and not be, like I like LL's comment saying we're 20 to 21 months away from Quest 4. Why does it have to be so far away? And I immediately do the opposite thing in my head, where it's like, I want it to be now, right? Like I'm trying to pull it into the present just with hope, because I want it now. But there's a lot of work for Meta to do in its ecosystem before getting that step ready, before trying to get that one right. Like a Quest 4 that actually does what we need it to do, what we just showed up on that screen, at those prices is still a miracle. Is the word that Meta researchers use. They use the word miracles to describe what they needed to do to make this like commonplace everyday technology. And now you've got Quest 3 at 500, Quest 3S at 300, and you have this giant hole in the market above those products. And you also have the move towards controller-free use of headsets. So Meta is still differentiated by the fact that they bundle the controllers versus Vision Pro, and that's not something they're going to want to abandon anytime soon. However, you can still bring the cost of the package lower. So there's room for this product line to move in both directions. You can both see the Horizon OS product line moving down below 300 when you drop those controllers, and you can see it moving well above 500 as soon as you get to the Quest 4 or other Horizon OS headsets from other partners.
I still think for Quest 4, I mean, this is very speculative. We're talking about something that is likely, as was said, 20 or so months out. I think they're going to still want to hit that $500 price point, 600 at most, which is why it's possible that they will just have eye tracking and not dedicated face tracking cameras. But again, if you have downwards facing cameras that are on the lower surface of the headset, you can use those for face tracking as well. What we have seen, as we've discussed on the show before, is that Meta is putting a lot of research, and they've actually shipped it into Quest now to animate your facial expressions based on your microphone input. And something I noted at the time is that if you combine that with eye tracking input, you would get an even higher quality output, because eye tracking isn't just tracking the gaze of your eyes where they're looking. It also tracks, your pupil size, whether you're blinking, and all of those things can be correlated with whether you're laughing and your other kind of facial expressions. When it comes to Quest Pro itself and this kind of discontinuation, there's a question here asking whether Meta ever used foveated rendering, eye-tracked foveated rendering, because of course, what is popular on the Quest ecosystem is static foveated rendering, where the outer edges of the lens are rendered at a lower resolution in the center, but it's not based on where you're looking. The answer is that they did. The Quest Pro does support eye-tracked foveated rendering. It is a part of Meta's SDKs, and it was supported in maybe 3 or so games, and that may have changed since the launch of Quest Pro. But the reality is that this thing sold so few units that developers don't even justify the time to add eye-tracked foveated rendering. If they look at their user base for a typical Quest game, and back then, when 6 months after this thing launched, it was 98% Quest 2 and 2% Quest Pro, and that's being generous in many cases. Why would they, spend time adding a feature that would benefit 2% of users? And today, it might be, 1/3 Quest 3 and Quest 3S, and then majority rest Quest 2 and like 1% Quest Pro. The reality is that they don't want to justify it. But the question did ask, is this in the SDK? Yes. James Howe is asking again, they meant at the OS level. Is it used in Meta's home environment? No, that's the irony. Not even Meta justified it. Meta didn't even introduce eye tracking in the system for pretty much anything, right? They didn't have any kind of optic ID unlock system. They didn't use it for verification, unlocking. They didn't use it for gaze and pinch, right? This headset sat here for 2 years on the market, or a year and a half before Vision Pro, and they didn't add the ability to gaze with your eyes and pinch with your fingers. They pretty much ignored the existence of it, except for using it to drive avatars in Horizon Worlds and Horizon Workrooms, which is crazy, right? And this was one of the things Palmer Luckey heavily criticized Meta for. You put out this headset, its whole point is it has these new features, and almost nothing bothered to use it, which is crazy. But it just shows that Meta reacted to the fact that nobody bought this realistically. And I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but pretty much almost no one bought this. And you can tell that by the price cut, right? Cutting a product from $1,500 to $1,000 4 months after it launched is essentially admitting that it vastly missed its sales targets. And I think the reason for that is simply that this thing was under-specced. I think that Meta has taken the wrong lesson from this. I think if you look at the way Meta talks about this, they say, well, the lesson from this is that there's no market for high-end headsets. So we should focus on the $300 to $500 price range. Clearly, we tried to launch a headset with extra features and better ergonomics at 1,500. Then we cut it to 1,000, and it still didn't sell. Therefore, there's no market. I think the real answer here is that it just didn't pass the quality bar, right? The pass-through was laughable. Some people think Quest 3's pass-through is bad, and you can argue about that all day long, but the pass-through on this thing was awful. I think Quest 3's is on the order of 18 pixels per degree, the color pass-through. This thing was like 4, 5, or 6 pixels per degree, and it isn't even color pass-through. It's black and white pass-through, where they add color on top from a single color camera in the middle. So as you move an object, you can see the color following along. Then you have the chip, which is just Quest 2's chip with a little few features added. So I criticized in my review at the time that you boot this thing up and it can't handle all the things it's trying to do. It lags like hell. They may have fixed that over time, but I used it for the first 6 to 9 months pretty heavily, and it never was resolved then. It didn't have scene meshing, right? Your Quest 3 and your Quest 3S generate an environment mesh of the room, and that's used for mixed reality. This thing didn't have that. It didn't have the depth API, so you couldn't do hand occlusion or anything like that. It was just an underbaked product. And then you get to the resolution, right? So Meta was talking about this virtual screens use case that we talk about all the time, that Apple Vision Pro focuses on. They were talking about that back in 2022 when they launched this thing. They were, you could argue, on the scale of a big tech company talking to the world, ahead of the curve on that. The problem was that the headset that they were pitching for it had like 1.8K panels, right? There was the great controversy that on paper, this thing had lower resolution than Quest 2. In reality, because Quest 2 is one panel and it's kind of seeing only a small section of it, this thing did have slightly higher resolution, but only slightly, right? This is a far cry from the near 4K resolution of Apple Vision Pro. This is not a pro headset in that sense. It didn't have the resolution for virtual screens. It didn't have the pass-through or room sensing capabilities for mixed reality. And it didn't have the ability to do photorealistic avatars. It was not good enough as a product, and Meta, I suspect and fear, has learned completely the wrong lesson from it.
So this thing debuted at $1,500 and then was dropped to $1,000 very, very quickly. And I'm seeing in the comments everyone discussing sort of their budget for VR, their budget for new technology. I'm seeing this trend through the whole comments going back to the beginning of people sort of budgeting out what they've got in their heads. And you're thinking about that combo, right? A Quest 3, a PC, and a 4K monitor, right? That's a really, really cool combination, and it's a really appealing combination that a lot of really enthusiastic people go and get. But there's other combinations, right? You don't get the monitor, you just get the VR headset and the PC. There's also, you just get the VR headset. And but the amounts is what's interesting to me. People are talking about like I'm trying to imagine in the minds of our viewers, what's their budget for spending on VR per year? I imagine for a lot of people, they could spend $500 without getting yelled at or causing too much debt to accumulate in a year on their VR. If they want to go up to $1,000, they need to get justification for it. It needs to make me money. It needs to be entertainment on a scale that I won't get elsewhere, right? That's the way people start thinking about their spending on these things, right? Then you go up to $1,500 and it's like, gosh, this thing better, launch a new career for me, or $3,500, right? You start talking about people who are a niche within a niche within a niche of their creative communities. The reason I want to focus on this or think about this is everyone in our audience is at a different stage of do I spend my $500 this year, or do I hold it off for next year and turn it into $1,500 when I combine it with next year's allotment of my tech purchases and get the headset next year as a whole package? And I feel bad for anyone that went and got the Quest Pro thinking it was the future, using it as a test bed. I guess we'll keep an eye out for it, right? If someone is out there and says, my product became really successful on Quest 4 or Apple Vision Pro, some other face tracking headset, because I was able to prototype it on the Quest Pro, then like this won't be as much of a failed product. It'll have actually served its purpose and made something exist that wouldn't exist without it.
Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree with you there. This essentially turned out to be a dev kit for face and eye tracking, having face and eye tracking in a standalone headset. And there are developers who used that. There are, enterprise companies who needed an application that used eye tracking or face tracking. But that's not the kind of market Meta wanted. That's a couple of thousand people at most. This was supposed to be a headset for, low digit millions, and maybe at worst close to 1 million. And from what we understand, it probably sold like a couple of 100,000 at most, at best. It essentially was not a viable consumer product. Now, there are, as Shal Alaska is pointing out, and other people are pointing out, there is another market that loved this headset, and it's VR chat players. They love the fact that they could get eye tracking and face tracking in a standalone headset that kind of just worked, that could wirelessly connect to VR chat. If you go into VR chat, you can find people using Quest Pro all the time. But as James O'Loughlin says in his latest comment here, Quest Pro is aimed for remote work. This thing was pitched, was designed realistically and kind of finalized during the pandemic. I strongly suspect that because of the global supply chain issues, this thing was a year late. I think it was supposed to come out in 2021, 1 year after Quest 2, and in fact, it got delayed into 2022, by which time it was almost defunct. It was almost obsolete. And as I've said over and over again, it was aimed for remote work, but the avatars weren't good enough for that. The resolution wasn't good enough for the screens. It simply didn't deliver. But the core idea here, the core idea was fine. It wasn't the idea. And Meta has made this mistake over and over again, where it used to offer 3D movie rentals on a store back in the Gear VR days. And then, at some point it stopped doing that, going, oh, I guess this is a bad idea. No one's using it. But it wasn't a bad idea. The headsets just weren't comfortable and high resolution enough to make it worth putting on a headset for it. So if you get to the point where the headsets are good enough, like Apple Vision Pro, people love watching 3D movies on the headset. And we've seen over and over again Meta do the same mistake. 360 videos was a huge pushback in that days. 180 degree as well. Again, as we've said over and over again on the show, it wasn't good enough. Now it is. It's possible for something to be a good idea, but not past the quality bar at which it's viable for people to actually want to use. And I think that's the same thing here. The irony is that if you were using this as a dev kit for eye and face tracking for a future Meta headset that was to come, that market never came, right? There wasn't a Quest 3 Plus with eye tracking or a Quest 3 Pro. We've seen from reporting that there was going to be a Quest Pro 2 this year, 2024, alongside Quest 3S. There would have also been a Quest Pro 2, last year, it's 2025, last year alongside Quest 3S, but that was cancelled. And then there was going to be a 2026 Quest Pro 2, and then that was cancelled as well. And so we're going to have to wait until these features arrive in the mainline Quest series.
Lots of discussion out there and a lot of tangents we could go down with them, but we need to move through some of these issues. I do appreciate sort of like this is the rest in peace segment, right? We stopped talking about this headset even more than we already stopped talking about it now that it's officially dead here. And I'm loving the discussion out there from all the people thinking about what this meant. There was Mestora's Mars saying, I had to do zero convincing. The wife loved VR or loved it, and I sold stuff to raise 90% of the price, and it was win-win. I love that, and it really embodies a lot of how people have had to struggle their way across the VR market over the last 15 years. Like, I am one of those people that it's like, I need to raise $1,000 here. I could maybe close the gap here by selling some old hardware. And yeah, that's part of the equation. And that's why this whole like move fast and break things is so rough, right? Meta is very skilled at devaluing your old hardware, it seems.
Yeah. So two last things I want to say before we move on. Firstly, we did warn people in our review. I saw someone saying that Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, warned people not to buy this. I'm not sure what his exact words were, but we did say in our review, this is essentially a dev kit for early adopters and super enthusiasts, and it wasn't worth the price. We said that from day one. The other thing is that with this off the market, there is somewhat of an absence for face tracking. You can get it from some of the Vive products, but then you have to kind of contend with those Fresnel lenses, not the pancake lenses here. The Samsung headset that runs Android XR, as far as we understand, does not have face tracking, though we need to follow up to double, triple confirm that. The Play for Dream MR headset that some people are talking about doesn't have face tracking. Apple Vision Pro does have face tracking from those downwards facing cameras that also track your hands, but it doesn't have that kind of internal upper face camera. It has these two eye tracking cameras, but I'm not sure it actually gets some of the upper facial muscles that Quest Pro got. So it kind of really heavily was focused on that face tracking that is kind of out of the market. But as Ian said, we do have to move on from this. We do have to say rest in peace to Quest Pro. It was in some ways ahead of its time, in other ways behind its time. It's an interesting product. It clearly taught Meta a lot. I really don't want to extend this conversation, but I do want to quickly note that as we covered, John Carmack knew it was going to fail and tried to kill it before it launched. We've talked about that before, but John Carmack, he did not want this thing to launch and tried to kill it, and he lost the battle. It came out. He was proven right. In some ways, the Quest 3S is the headset that Carmack wanted to make.
Yeah, I've never seen a Carmack bingo chart of predictions. If someone is is that obsessive and remembers all of his conversations and all his predictions that he makes in his nonstop talks, but he also has that sort of canary in the coal mine comment about the push towards Horizon Worlds potentially costing thousands of people. I put that out in multiple places. I think that video lives on our YouTube as well for people to just mark that in history and see his comments. So when you're bringing up the Quest Pro, him predicting that, I think I need to just bring up the comment about the push for Horizon Worlds coming right before massive layoffs.
The one last thing I want to say about this topic, and I'm very sorry for people who want us to move on, but is the controllers. We said at the time they were the best thing about it. These are controversial because some people don't like them. It appears that in some lighting conditions and some rooms, they don't work well. In some, they do. This is the thing. These are running, they are running chipsets that ironically are as powerful each as an Oculus Go. But, they do have slightly smaller cameras than what you have in the headset. They are obviously less powerful. They're kind of moved a lot faster. For me, these things worked really, really well. They initially, when it launched, had this annoying issue where it took like 5 seconds to initialize. But I think around 4 to 6 months after launch, they released a firmware update that for me fixed that. So I really like these controllers. As well, their 3-point haptics is amazing. Almost no app used them, of course, but they actually have like separate haptic actuators under the index finger and the thumb compared to the main handle one, which is really cool. You can move it everywhere you want, and it works really well for me in my lighting conditions and room. I don't know if we're going to see this again. I think it's unlikely that we'll see another Quest Pro controller from Meta. I don't see that happening, but I could definitely see a third-party company like Logitech or someone making it.
Well, it's fun when we get into our next subject. We do need to sort of start transitioning to that, but there was the discussion for a long time with us about the potential of a portal calling device as sort of a external way of giving you added body tracking. So when we talk about this next subject, it's going to fill that sort of gap. I have a dead left Quest Pro controller. Bring it up on the show multiple times. David always asks me, why didn't I send that in for replacement? And well, because I didn't need this headset. I never needed this headset or the things it did enough to go and send that. And I like keeping Meta's failed hardware around as well, including, in that failed hardware pile, David, I have one of somewhere floating around here. I have a pair of the original Oculus Touch controllers that I ripped open to find the secret messages hidden inside, written on the wire bands by the employees. I can't remember what it was, but we'll be watching you or something, or always watching. It was some jokey comments back in the year, and Meta had to come out and apologize prior to those things being in people's hands. I always think of that. Yeah, I've got those floating around somewhere, and my left Quest Pro controller will go into the pile right next to it.
I don't know why it annoys me so much that you don't replace it, but I think, yeah, I don't think you're going to get a replacement at this point.
Oh well, I've got one that works. That's all I care about, David. I've got the right one that works until Meta chooses to brick that one, and I've got the left one that just I can point at and say that's what Meta does with its firmware updates. All right.
D1360VR points out something interesting about these controllers that not many people know, that they had like a secret touchpad. The side was actually a touchpad. And here's the crazy part. This is as far as we can tell, every shipping unit of Touch Pro controllers, but it isn't enabled in the software. The only way this was found out was by like a PC kind of firmware sleuth playing around with these things and finding out that it actually under the hood at the firmware level was doing this. So it does have a touchpad, and it just was never enabled in the system. Really bizarre.
We'll circle back on, I think, the touchpad idea a little bit when we get into the Sony subject at the end of our show here. So also just another pitch to hit that like button. And I've seen a couple members have joined our website through the course of our show. So thank you to those members. Thank you to the members who have joined YouTube as well. It really does mean a tremendous amount to David and I, and gives us a lot of push to keep growing what we're doing here.
Okay, let's talk about the next subject, BodyLink. So this is a Kickstarter that has been funded now. It went up at the start of this year for a body tracking camera for TV games and VR. So this thing is essentially a standalone console. It runs Android and has a chipset. It has two cameras on it. One of them is like a wide angle tracking camera for tracking your body, and the other is a 4K color camera for capturing footage. So the main pitch of this product is to just be a standalone Connect. So you don't need an Xbox, you don't need a PC, you don't have a headset or anything like that. You buy this product, you put it under your TV and plug it in via HDMI, and you can play body tracking games Connect style on your TV. Now, that's fine and well, but that's not what we care about. I don't think it's going to have a bigger market than Connect had. I think it's going to have all the same issues as Connect, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the product's secondary function, and that is VR body tracking. So you'd still have this thing plugged in under your TV and HDMI, and then you would set it to VR tracking mode, and it would then, over your local network, send the tracking data, the tracking skeleton, to your standalone headset, like your Quest, or to your PC on SteamVR. And then that can be used in VR chat, they've confirmed, as well as their own game. This is from Rebuff Reality, the company that you may know from making Quest accessories, as well as the game Dance Dash, I think it's called, which is a game on Quest and Vive and Steam that is very, very focused around body tracking. It really works best with body tracking. So the retail price they claim they're going to hit with this thing by the end of the year when it's generally available is $300. For Kickstarter backers, they're offering it for around $170, depending on the tier. They say they're going to ship around August. And I think it's an interesting idea. The other functionality that this has on top of the body tracking, which is really cool and is why the color camera matters for VR, is in supported titles, mixed reality capture. So you're playing a VR game with body tracking on your Quest or your other headset, and this thing uses its color camera to then cut you out and overlay you on the game. Now, this again is only on supported software. It's essentially the same thing that Live does. We talked about this before, of doing that kind of third-person VR footage where you are mixed into your position in the game. And they want to be able to do this in like a console-ified, streamlined way without the need for a PC. So we'll have to keep an eye on how well that works out in terms of content support. They claim, you're even going to be able to just like instantly upload videos to social media that use this. If they can do this, it's going to be cool. $300 is the issue, of course. $300 is the same price as the entire Quest 3S. It's going to have limited appeal for, the wider market, but it's an interesting proposition, right? we will be really curious to see how well this thing tracks. They say that the tracking, is a wide field of view camera at 90 frames per second with a state-of-the-art computer vision algorithm. So really curious to see how well this thing tracks in real time.
Yeah, maybe off subject, I don't know, but I tried to get Piano Vision as well as two apps on Apple Vision Pro that were advertised as piano tracking apps or piano learning apps that would sync up to your physical piano, and it was a pain to get all of them. Like I couldn't get a proper sync up of physical piano or keyboard to the virtual one, no matter how hard I tried. And that's just an object. That's just one object in my house. And your body is another object. Your keyboards are another object, right? Like there's a lot of objects around your house that you need to have tracked by your VR headset for various purposes. And that's a larger trend I'm seeing this year is there's a lot of different efforts to like did you feel the difference in the market here, David, from where we were in like 2016, where you had to have SteamVR tracking base stations in order to have a tracked object or to do anything? Like now the options are quite varied and there's multiple avenues to bring both your body and various objects into VR.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of different companies offer different options. As you say, it used to be that you needed those base stations and Vive trackers. Then you have the Vive Ultimate trackers. You have the Sony Mocopi that we'll talk about later. Meta then added inside-out upper body tracking, so you can get the upper body without any external hardware at all. We have, Pico with their leg trackers that you strap around your ankle. The body tracking market, all of the pieces are coming from different directions, but the problem is that on Quest, it's still quite limited as to what's really supported, right? And the main marker for this continues to be PC VR chat players. And I wonder what their views on this thing will be.
We should try to get Luna or someone else in our comments to talk about the sort of threshold for quality tracking that it takes for VR chat to really feel great, right? Like there is a threshold there that a lot of those VR chat users, they'll take anything, right? You'll take legs that are AI generated if you have to, but when you start adding 2 points, 4 points, 6 points, 8 points, 10 points, 12 points, even beyond of tracking on top of that basic level, like you just how does that equate? That equates to hours in VR. That added immersion. And we recognize that here at UploadVR. We want to do recognition of like it does equate to hours in VR when you bring your body in at high quality.
Yeah, and I mean the feeling is incredible, right? If you've never tried body tracking in VR, as in being able to look down and see your leg in the position it's in, and your torso in the same way, and your elbow at the same position it is rather than estimated, it is quite magical. As Shalalaska is pointing out here, an issue with this is that it only works from one direction. So if you are in VR and you don't know which direction this thing is at, especially if you're in a wireless headset, if you're turned away and you're facing like one of your arms or one of your legs in front of you, this thing isn't going to get a view. Ideally, if you did want to have a camera-based outside in tracking solution, you would want to have two. You would want to have a camera up in each corner, essentially a base station, but instead of the lighthouse tracking system, these would just be cameras running computer vision. The one thing I disagree with Shallow Alaska on is that they say that you need trackers attached to you to really cut it. I think as computer vision enhances, if you look at some of the research here on body tracking, it is one of the active areas of research, and we are seeing some of that start to trickle down the research pipeline to products. There is a potential here that cameras are fully capable of tracking your body highly accurately. The issue is, of course, as I just said, you need to handle the occlusion issue. You need to have different perspectives. If you did have a system like this that was running a state-of-the-art model that did have, cameras on both sides of the room, I think that probably would be sufficient to have high-quality body tracking of the kind you get with attached trackers. Shell Alaska is pointing out that, this is for today. One of the interesting things that we saw in the past, and I don't know if I'll be able to get an image up of it, is the idea of putting cameras in the handles of controllers. So we just talked about the Quest Pro controllers, and they had cameras on them that looked out and away from you to track them. But what if you have another camera that's on the base of the handle pointing towards you? And so then you have cameras downwards facing on the headset, cameras handle outwards towards you facing on the controllers, and all of these things at once are providing different perspectives that are fed into the same machine learning model that comes up with the position of your body. We've seen research on that. They were able to come up with some very, very high quality results. It may be, though, that you do just to not have occlusion issues at all, you may just have to strap something on. But I don't think you need to cover your body in trackers. I think it's very likely that if you combined a Quest 3 style inside out upper body tracking model with something that was worn on your ankles, because for many people, the headset's just physically not going to be able to see your legs depending on your body shape, then that could fuse into one model that would come up with a good result.
So there's where's the comment here I wanted to talk about, where I think it was Rebellion saying that they were thinking about making a full body tracking game, and I love that comment. The thing that that comment made me think about was haptics. So the haptics discussion we always come back to. Anytime I talk about hand tracking, everyone always goes, "I can't go without haptics," and it's something for us to think about when we talk about this idea of body tracking and the idea that you might wear bands on your wrists or legs. The example I want to bring up was Headmaster. Does anyone remember playing Headmaster on PSVR 1? So you had a dev that came out and said, I'm going to make a soccer game for a headset without any body tracking whatsoever, without any foot tracking. And what did they do? They came up with a game that's just about heading the ball into the goal, right? And it works incredibly well. It really nails that feeling of you doing this head motion just right to try to angle the ball into the goal just right. But what I love about this as an example is, right, that game came out for PSVR 1. I don't think it made it to PSVR 2, where the headset's vibration would have made that an even better experience. Can you imagine heading the ball, and the moment that you collide with the ball, the headset vibrates and you feel that bit of immersion added to it? Well, now imagine the same sort of thing on your hands or your feet with open hand tracking. I'm going to have to bring this up. Like, I've got the Tap XR band over here, and I can put the Tap XR band. It has a camera pointed at my fingertips, or a sensor pointed at my fingertips, to try to capture all the tap movements of my fingers. You can imagine a camera pointed the other way or somewhere else on the wrist on an inside band placement to look at your whole body for body tracking there. And the reason I'm like also bringing up haptics is, if you pair the haptics up just right, nobody has really felt this. All the bands out there that are for tracking, do any of the bands also have haptics in them, David?
You mean as in like a Vive tracker with haptics? Not as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, so I think that's a real miss. I think if you pair it up just right at the platform level, and you can imagine sorts of things like Arlen is in our comments talking about this imagining of like having a tool in your wrist, right? Imagine that interaction you always see in the movies where like a person flips a gun or a knife out from their wrist, right? And they do this gesture and this thing grabs, locks into their hand. Imagine that your wrist gives you a little vibration the moment that the tool supposedly hits your palm. And there's a lot of opportunity for even a tool that makes haptics right at your palm to make you feel that. We've seen some of these things at conferences like CES or SIGGRAPH, where there are these tools that flip out like this for these various things. This is just such a long-winded way of saying, no matter what the body tracking does, I think you also need to have haptics in order to fill that gap that's expected from our audience out there. Like, they don't want to just go to body tracking or just, they don't want just the tracking. They also want it paired with haptics. And so, like, imagine a soccer game where you kick with the ball and you actually feel a slight little vibration right on the tip of your foot.
That is a really great point, actually. The other aspect of embodiment is not just vision. It's not just seeing your body in virtual space. It's your body being able to interact with that virtual space. in the form of haptic feedback. So that is a great point, but I think that's probably going to be something that's thought about more once body tracking is wider. At this point, we're still at the point where the vast majority of VR users do not have body tracking. A couple of comments here. We have Craig Melville saying you could do this with a mobile phone camera. And that's absolutely true. You can. And not only can you, but we reported on an app that does exactly that, Driver for VR. Today, right now, you can go and get that for your iPhone or Android phone. And, I've tried it, and I think a lot of people in the comments have probably tried it, and you can do that. The difference here that they argue is, firstly, that this is 90 hertz tracking. It's not just 60 like an app sampling your camera on your phone is. This is Driver for VR on screen right now. The other difference is that it's a wider field of view camera. It is very much so designed so that even when you're very close to it, if you've moved forward, it will still be able to capture you. You won't have to move it far away. With this phone solution, you kind of have to really make sure it's over in the corner and pointed towards you. So the other issue, of course, is the thing that we bring up all the time when it comes to why have a dedicated device instead of your phone? Running a computer vision model on your phone that doesn't have active cooling and doesn't have much space means that you're going to drain the battery and heat up your phone, and you can't use it. So it's not like, in the middle of your VR chat, you can just pull out your phone, because now your phone's docked over in the corner of the room, blasting its CPU and GPU at max and draining your battery out, or plugged into something in the corner. So this is just a dedicated device that takes the same principle. The other thing is, I was able to find the image for the research that we talked about that uses a camera on the bottom of the handle of the Touchlight controller to track your body. This was called Controller Pose, and you can see this here. This is obviously not a product. This is a research thing, so it doesn't look very sleek, but it has a bottom camera attached and a top camera, and from this, they are fusing that all into one model that comes up with compelling enough body tracking that they were able to, kick a ball. The other comment here I'm going to bring up is from Opsar, which goes, when is the Quest 3 supposed to track your shoulders just through its own cameras? I remember reading that. You've triggered a rant in me. So Quest 3 came out in October 2023, not last year, but the year before. In December 2023, just 2 months after, that feature released. It is not a future feature. It came out. It's called Inside Out Upper Body Tracking. And it is arguably one of the most significant additions to VR in years. I've tried it in the apps that use it. It works really well if you've got good lighting. It's the same kind of caveats as hand tracking. You need good lighting. And almost no app uses it. The founder and creator of the studio behind BoneLab and BoneWorks recently discussed this and said that, in his opinion, it's the most significant addition to VR since tracked controllers, and not body tracking in general. Quest 3's Inside Out Upper Body Tracking, and they're working very hard to bring it to BoneLab and the future Quest board of BoneWorks that was announced, and you can read on UploadVR.com about that. They're working hard to integrate it and integrate that into their kind of full body model system. And he's saying, this is amazing. Every other headset should do this. I don't, if you want the ultimate BoneLab experience, you don't want any other headset other than Quest 2 and Quest 3S. Meta has this unique feature that nobody has. They never market it. They didn't even talk about it in the Quest 3 keynote. They don't even support it in their own avatars or in Horizon Worlds or in any of their first-party content. And yeah, this is a huge problem with Quest. Sometimes you have all of these amazing features that are theoretically part of the SDK, whether it be dynamic occlusion or inside-out upper body tracking or all of these other things, and apps don't use it. I mean, one of the reasons is that it has a minor performance hit, but I would argue it's very, very, very much so worth it. The other reason, of course, is that it doesn't work on Quest 2, so it only works for Quest 3. I think as Quest 3S is getting more and more popular, as a larger percentage of the user base of games are on Quest 3S, we probably should see that feature used more. We're actually using a semi-related feature that we actually are running that in the studio, but these avatars don't support animating the body from it. What they do support, though, is continuing to move the hand pose when it can only see the arm. So if I move my hand above my head right now, you can see that the camera can't see my hand anymore, but it can see my arm. This is technically inside-out upper body tracking that is moving my hand right now. But you'll notice that I'm moving my fingers, and my fingers are not animated anymore because it can't see the hand. This is called wide motion mode for hand tracking. And it's leveraging inside-out upper body tracking, but without actually animating the body. It's just animating the arm, the hand position, I should say. No, you're muted, Ian.
So King Jellyfish saying, I'd pay for an outside VR headset. I think that's really interesting to think about, right? I think one way to phrase that or think about that is, right, you're asking for hardware and software that is built for all the use cases that happen outside. So in the Apple Vision Pro settings menu, there's people detection. I think it's like a whole sub menu with the little toggles of where you want people detection and where you don't. Nothing like that is happening, or at least what is the level of object detection? Like, there's nothing active on. What is the level of active detection on the Quest ecosystem right now, David?
There isn't. But one thing I would say, though, is there's a slight difference between tracking and segmentation. What you see there with your hands and arms on Vision Pro and with other people is segmentation. And that's a much simpler model, that it's 2D, right? It's in screen space. So you're able to cut out a person, but they're not actually in any way saying, oh, here's their hand and here's their arm. It's the same thing as if you're in a Zoom call and you change your background, right? Your PC cuts you out. That's all that Apple Vision Pro is doing. And I say all, it's still cool. And I would love to see it come to Quest, and it would be great, but it's not tracking the person in 3D. It's just cutting them out in 2D.
And then, yeah, so I mean, and so like you're on a plane and someone comes up to offer you a drink in the middle of the flight. They pop into your experience in Apple Vision Pro. That does not happen on Quest systems right now. And what that's partially like a cost related thing, right? Like, they don't have to put expensive sensors in it. They don't have to put expensive processors in there to process the feeds from the cameras to give you all of that info out there. So, like, you're describing things we will have in the future, and we will be able to use the headsets outside, and we will have all those detection features so that you don't feel uncomfortable with it. We're going to be a long episode today, David. I'm sorry. How you doing over there?
Yeah, we're gonna move to the next topic soon, but we have a question from Quentin, a member for 27 months. Thank you for your support. Asking, can you explain why features like upper body tracking aren't turned on for all apps by default? Why do devs need to add it to their games? So on Quest, just like on traditional consoles and like on mobile apps and the majority of computing platforms, every app is an island. It's running a game engine runtime and it's doing its own thing. So the developer is, they have their own character model, be it their, an avatar system like Ready Player Me or like meta avatars, or just something that their 3D artist has made up, the lead character in their game. And they take in your head and hand positions in their code, and they use that to drive the position of the character. And to make that work on a full body character model, they mostly use a traditional algorithm called IK, inverse kinematics. This is not a machine learning thing. This is just a mathematical way to make a full body move based on sparse input, so just hands and head, in a way that's somewhat convincing. So when you're in a typical VR shooter and you see a body moving along, and like when people move like this and it's moving, right now we're using IK. This is IK, inverse kinematics. That's what you're seeing. So the meta can't go into the game and change the developer's code and change the way that their character model is working. They would have to enable IOBT, inside-out body tracking, and then use the data that the IOBT API is giving to the app when you enable it, and use that to drive the character model. So there's development time, and again, that only works for these two headsets, Quest 3 and Quest 3S. So they have to write this code only for these headsets, and then they have to separately maintain a separate IK system for all the other old headsets. And there is a slight performance cost. Some people overstate the performance cost, though. I mean, again, we're running it right now to do hand tracking wide motion mode. it's a couple of percent. It's really not significant at all.
So Dino's question or comment here, would be cool to fly a plane with a flight stick. So imagine a physical flight stick right here in my hand, but also able to interact with the instrument panel with hand tracking. I love this. So we know that there's executives at Apple who are big simulation nuts, right? Like I went up and talked to him, the executive in question. They'll name him in the comments because I always forget who it is. And I asked him what headset he uses at home for his simulation setup, and he's like, "I'm not going to tell you." Like, oh, that's probably a good decision for you not to tell me that. But you can imagine this scenario where you've got a physical flight stick and then all of these panels all around, and you're wearing perhaps a watch over here and either a ring on your index finger or a band on this wrist. And you can imagine going and pressing a switch or flipping these switches, pressing all these buttons, and you get a haptic effect every time your finger collides with one of the switches, and then a full haptic effect when you grab the instrument panel right here. So one-to-one instrument panel tracking right here as you move this thing around, and then you get this little like ghost haptic effect coming from a wrist or a finger when you interact with everything else. I think there's a real opportunity for something like that to happen. And when we start talking about life after these big bulky controllers, that we're not talking about it being haptic free. We're talking about something like you just described out there.
So I love that idea. I love the idea of being able to switch the cockpit switches with your hand tracking and having haptics. But we have to get even the hand tracking part first. We don't have that today because obviously the place where these simulators live, the high-end ones that people love to use, is on PC. And the majority of PC VR headsets don't have hand tracking. And until very recently, not even all of the methods for connecting your Quest to your PC VR runtime, SteamVR, didn't support hand tracking. We talked about it last month that Steam Link just got the ability to forward Quest's hand tracking from the headset into PC VR apps. So on that level, developers have literally 1 month ago gotten the ability to use that hand tracking in PC VR. And I would love to see it happen. If you want to see it happen, you need to now go to those simulator developers, be it Eagle Dynamics for DCS or Microsoft Asobo for Flight Simulator, and say, I want this. And at some point, somebody's going to add it, and it's going to be a thing, right? All the pieces are in place for the haptic free version of this to happen now, right? And it still hasn't happened, but all the pieces are there. The other thing I want to say is that on Quest, you could see this with multimodal mode, right? So there are games like Warplanes, World War II Fighters, and Warplanes, World War One, as well as the new Dawn of Jets that just came out. I really recommend trying Dawn of Jets. It's a sort of semi-sim, mostly arcade jet game that just came out on Quest standalone, set in the kind of 1950s era of the first and second generation of jet fighters, where you use your touch controllers to control the cockpit, just like you do in Warplanes and in Ultra Wings standalone on Quest. But what you could absolutely imagine is that you use your touch controller to grab and emulate the stick, while you have your other hand available to flip the switches using multimodal mode, where you have hand tracking and controller tracking running at once, which is supported on Quest. And another feature that barely any app uses. When it came out, we said, this would be great for mini golf apps. Why can't, I be in walkabout mini golf and be using my controller for the golf club and have my hand available for social gestures? The reality is, again, because these things are only available on Quest headsets, developers are going to have to support this for only one platform. What if every headset supported it, right? If Valve added it to the Index tomorrow, and all of the other headsets that are on Steam magically supported it, sure, you might get more developers jumping in. But the reality is, a lot of these things we talk about here, they're not like they exist. It's just developers aren't using them yet.
Yeah, R is imagining a whole exoskeleton. We do see products like that out there. Don Hopper and Kyle out there might see some of those things out at CS. I've tried some of those things. It's pretty wild to have a telepresence robot with a glove on, right? And you see the path there. It's out there, but we have to get from here to there. And the thing that's funny is like everyone wants the option to have no body tracking while also having the option to flip a switch and go, I want full body tracking right now, and have it not be like necessary from the outset. Like, how do you get both of those things at once is not easy. We need to move on, David. It's we've got two more stories here before we get into the two final big stories that we expect to eat up a big discussion here. So that's my long. We've got a long 2-hour episode here already. We're going to go probably to 3 hours. So please become a member. Hit the like button. Share out this link with people you know who are interested in VR. We're going to be talking about Sony. And we're going to talk about the use of a VR headset in a courtroom. So we've done some exclusive reporting there, reaching out and getting into that in a way that you probably haven't seen in other outlets. So we hope to get into that with you. And thank you to the members who joined with us during the show. Callie out there, thank you so much, as well as to John and all the other members. David, let's move on here. What's our next story?
Sure. So we're going to talk about two Nvidia stories. The first of which is that GeForce Now is coming to Quest 3, Pico, and Apple Vision Pro's web browsers. So today, if you use one of these headsets and you try to use GeForce Now, it will give you a unsupported error. And by the end of the month, they say they're going to roll out, or at least start rolling out, support for this in those web browsers. So on Quest, this joins Xbox Cloud Gaming, which is already available on Quest. And as we often say on this show, the huge potential of these headsets as they get higher resolution and slimmer and lighter is that they can turn screens into software. So that could be for a local PC. You can use Steam Link on Apple Vision Pro or Quest to have a enormous virtual screen to play your PC games on. You could be in bed from in a completely different room to where your PC is, and have your gamepad connected to the headset and forward through and play this enormous screen. As Ian said, on Apple Vision Pro with the ultra wide mode, you could play, Stardew Valley on ultra wide, or a strategy game or something else that is just really suited for that ultra wide experience. But what happens if you don't have a gaming PC? What if you're one of the majority of Quest users who does not own one? What if you're the kind of user that we hear about quite often in the Quest ecosystem now, who owns, say, a Nintendo Switch and a Quest, but really likes the idea of, playing some of the AAA games that come out for PlayStation or Xbox or PC? Well, Xbox Cloud Gaming has been available on Quest as a potential there. You pair your gamepad via Bluetooth, and from the cloud, you stream on this enormous virtual screen. Of course, Xbox is one ecosystem. They have this kind of model where you pay a subscription to access this games catalog, and that's not the way everyone wants to get their games. GeForce Now is a different kind of cloud gaming service. Instead of leveraging a Nvidia store or something like that, what Nvidia does is they partnered with Steam, Epic Games, Ubisoft Store, Microsoft Store, EA Store, and GOG. And so if you already own a game on those stores, you can play it on GeForce Now. There are 3 tiers that they have here. And the free one is ad supported and puts you in a queue if the service is busy and has like 1080p as the max. Then they have a $10 a month one, which goes up to like 1440p in shorter queues and no ads. And then they have like a $20 a month ultimate tier, which has like, I think, up to 4K, 240 hertz, ultra low latency, HDR, and RTX settings, and all of the Nvidia goodies available without having a gaming PC. So interesting model, leverages your existing PC game stores that you may own content on. This means that, when Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, presumably on PC eventually, someone without a PC or a PlayStation can just buy it and play it on their headset on a giant screen. Jack B asking the question that I asked as soon as this came out: is there any word on 3D depth support? No, but that would be amazing. I think it would be so good if GeForce Now or Xbox Cloud Gaming allowed developers to add 3D to really take advantage of being on a headset.
But yeah, we should move right on to this next NVIDIA subject and the new graphics cards here, and get right to those last two subjects. Do let us know if you have any questions as we move towards the final two subjects. We'll want to address any long-standing or just questions that we might have missed, do feel free to ask your question a couple times over the course of an episode if we happen to miss it in the early times. Yeah, we have a very robust audience out there today, so I just want to say thank you to the hundreds of people that we have tuning in today. And yeah, let's talk about these new graphics cards. Or any comments you want to talk about before we do that?
Yeah, Onakazi has a comment here saying, if you don't have a gaming PC, I don't see how you can take advantage of this. I'm not sure what you mean by that. This is a cloud service. These PCs are in the cloud. This isn't going through a local device. I mean, and if you want to use Steam, you can just download the Steam phone app and purchase the game you want, and then link your Steam account to GeForce Now and play that. But as you say, Ian, yes, let's quickly talk about the graphics cards. This isn't, a show that is mainly focused on this, so we will try to just briefly mention this. But, as any PC gamer knows, this was the week that Nvidia announced its RTX 50 series, and AMD sort of announced, or at least teased and confirmed the existence of its RX 970 and RX 970 XT. So if you are a PC VR user, you'll know that you always want more GPU horsepower, especially as we're about to enter this era where 4K per eye headsets are coming on the market. If you use simulators, or even if you just use VR chat in complicated, graphically detailed worlds with dozens of high-quality avatars, you're never really happy with performance. You always wish you could either, get more frames per second or push up the eye buffer resolution a little bit higher. And so there's just, amongst this enthusiast base, especially those that are playing these incredibly graphically demanding and detailed simulators, they want the best, and they want to get the highest end cards, and that's why we're continuing to see this push forward. What's interesting about this, we'll talk about the Nvidia cards first, the RTX 50 series, is that when it comes to the raw raster rendering performance increase, it's only on the order of 20 to 50%, depending on the game you're in. That's pretty much because these cards now have more CUDA cores than the past generation. They use slightly more watts, they draw more power, and they have GDDR7 VRAM, which offers around 33% faster memory bandwidth compared to GDDR6X. NVIDIA's main push in these cards is not fully relevant to VR. Their main push is to continue to generate more of each frame and more frames in general with AI, machine learning. So they now have multi-frame generation. In VR, you may use application space warp. A developer can use it in their Quest app to double their frames from, say, 36 to 72, or 45 to 90. And on PC, you have motion smoothing on SteamVR and space warp on the Rift runtime that applies that automatically when a game can't keep frame rate, right? It jumps down to half frame rate, and every other frame is synthetically generated. Well, NVIDIA's DLSS has been doing that for flat PC games, traditional PC games, since DLSS 3. But now with the 50 series, they're doing multi-frame generation. So for each real frame, they're generating 3 synthetic frames. So that's when NVIDIA comes out with their marketing and they make the claim the RTX 5070 is as powerful as the RTX 4090, so a much cheaper new card. What they really mean is, in applications where they're generating synthetically 3 frames for every real frame. Now, that's fine for PC gaming where latency isn't as important as in VR, but in VR, latency matters so much more, and that's not going to work in VR unless you were talking about a 240 hertz headset, maybe, where you're taking a 60 frames per second render and going all the way up to 240. That would be cool to see, I guess, but not really where we're at right now. And even still, I think for latency, the responsiveness of a truly higher rendering rate is much more important in VR than it is for this. Yeah, so Onakazi, to be clear, that line from NVIDIA of 5070 is as powerful as 4090 is entirely dependent on this multi-frame generation. So it's as powerful because the 4090 is generating 1 in every 2 frames, as in rendering 1 in every 2 frames, and the 5070 is only generating 1 in every 4 frames. So it's a very, very caveated, more powerful. For VR gamers, this is really a 20 to 50% performance increase.
Leave it to the VR experts to track exactly how many of their frames are actually real and how many of them are being generated. Yeah, it matters in VR significantly, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's fascinating that VR did this first, and then Nvidia started doing it for flat screen gaming. And more than that, right? Even the rotational time warp that headsets do for every single frame, there is not a frame that you've seen in a modern headset that isn't rotationally warped. When you turn your head right, you're actually what's done after the frame is rendered is that the frame is warped to the right slightly, so that in the time it's taken between starting to render the frame and presenting the frame to the headset, it is more accurate to where your head has moved. That's something that every headset has been doing for years and years and years now. And NVIDIA is bringing that to flat screen gaming as well. They call it NVIDIA Reflex 2. They're like, oh, this is our new low latency. So they do the same thing with the mouse. So you move your mouse to the right. So say your mouse has moved slightly to the right between the time that the frame started rendering and when it's shown on the screen, they warp the frame to the right. It's directly copied from VR. It's fascinating that all of this stuff it was invented by necessity for VR, the rotational time warp stuff, because it was just, we need the lowest latency. You would be surprised how much engineering work it took to get VR to where it is today. There are so many things that happen underneath the hood in these VR compositors that we all take for granted, that back in 2013 and 2014, when all this was being invented, anyone who was around then saw what it looked like before, saw what it looked like to have an effective 100 millisecond motion to photon latency. The headsets we have today, look, being in this studio right now at 120 hertz with sub 20 millisecond motion to photon latency, we don't know how good we have it.
It's funny. I'm imagining everyone, when they see these cards, starts trying to build a visual picture in their head of like, how good will it look? How, like, what frame rate am I going to get with what resolution in my specific world that I want to go into for 80 to 100 hours? And you start imagining it, and you try to get that graphics card, you build it for days and put it together, and there you are. I'm still rocking a 2080. I'm still using that on my machine, and I don't feel that much of an urge to move on, even though, like, I do that mental gymnastics every single time. It's like, well, wait, what if I went up to 32 gigs of RAM and went with the biggest beast? Would I really be able to show people how beautiful it looks in VR chat or Elite Dangerous? Is that really going to change things for me and for our viewers to understand that this is out there?
So I think it depends on what you're using. If you're using a simulator that really demands this performance, right? I don't think anyone is happy with their VR performance in Flight Simulator 2024, nor are they in a lot of the other simulators. And it's not, some of that is that they're not designed to run at this kind of really high refresh rate and resolution. And some of that is just that VR is so demanding, right? It's more demanding than traditional gaming because you've got two eyes, you've got stereo rendering. It's very wide field of view compared to typical monitor field of view settings, because meaning you see more geometry out there, and it's latency sensitive. There are techniques that are used in traditional rendering on consoles and PC gaming that sacrifice latency for throughput, for higher frame rate, but higher latency. And those techniques cannot be used in VR. So it's so demanding. But I think, as I said at the start, we're seeing this era of 4K micro OLED headsets arriving via whether it be Shiftall's Megane Superlight, whether it be potentially Pimax Dream Air, if they do manage to ship that. Even if those two companies don't do that, there's clearly going to be an emergence of these PC VR headsets that are driving resolutions that we just have not seen before. And there's going to be demand for more cards. So there's two little sub things I want to say about the NVIDIA cards. They also bring DisplayPort 2.1, which should allow for far future headsets that are even higher resolution I think the 4K per eye headsets that we're talking about coming are going to be 90 hertz. I think because they're limited by DisplayPort 1.4, but with DisplayPort 2.1, you should be able to see like 4K per eye, 120 hertz, 140 hertz, maybe even like 5K per eye and 6K per eye headsets down the line. Not this year, but further in the future. You need some serious bandwidth for that. The other thing is for compression streaming for standalone headsets using PC VR. I said earlier in this show that I really do like the quality of this today with the AV1 codec and Wi-Fi 6E and virtual desktop. But there is one problem with it. There's one way in which it's not good enough, and that is the color encoding. This is a esoteric topic, and we don't have time to get into it in detail. But essentially, all of this compression streaming today, whether it be AirLink, Virtual Desktop, SteamLink, is using 420 color encoding. And that means that the colors are kind of compressed in a way that reduces the vibrancy of the image, to just greatly simplify this. With the RTX 50 series, the encoder, the NVENC encoder, has added support for 422 color encoding. And that means that they will be able to encode over a compressed video stream a wider range of colors. The one problem is that Qualcomm's decoder on the headsets like Quest and Pico does not support that yet. We don't know if that's a software thing or a hardware thing, but at least the PC side is ready to encode it. If Qualcomm could enable it on the headset side in software or in the XR2 Gen 3 that will go into Quest 4 next year, if they can support that in hardware, then you will see a richer and more vibrant image when using your wireless Quest or Pico headset on PC.
So there's several comments here I want to bring up. Davin Bigelow saying, I got my gaming PC for VR. It plays Spotify now. Crispy saying, making a comment on my 2080, saying 12 frames per second is enough for anyone. I appreciate that comment. Then James was suggesting that maybe you should consider getting a 40 series chip processor now before the reviews drop for the next series, because the prices might change once those reviews drop. Let's see. A lot of people talk about how ray tracing is really incredible when you really want it, and people are really ready for us to get into the court case and the Sony standalone headset thing. The only thing I wanted to respond to on a lot of those comments is, I have a 2080 machine that took me through, I think, Half-Life Alyx, took me through a lot of the great PC VR experiences over the last few years. But now, after the last 24 hours or 48 hours, I think I'm going to probably put it in its place as a triple monitor headless PC I'm using it right now. I'm using my Windows 11 2080 PC as a giant virtual display, and at any moment in this studio with you, I could add 2 more monitors on either side of that display, and that's hugely useful. That's big. I'm going to need that a lot in this job with you broadcasting for our studio, and in fact, I could host this entire show now independently with the triple monitor setup, right? I'd have the studio running on the PC, have the whole OBS setup here on the 3 monitor setup wherever I am, because I've got a Windows 11 machine with so-so performance, and because I'm not using it in VR mode. So now the irony here is that, like, every time this happens, now I'm actually considering and thinking, what would I get if I went to this new system? And do I need it to, do I keep this system doing what it's doing as my triple monitor VR setup, and just you build a whole nother $1,500 PC just for the VR that some of our commenters are talking about, ray traced with all the mods?
Why not use the same PC for both things? Why not just swap out the graphics card?
Exactly. Then you go to why people start eating from there. Like, you got to go sell the original, right, to make some of the money to afford the new one, and you've got to figure out, oh wait, do I really want to be without my PC for 2 weeks? Like you got to plan this out, and it's hard. And the thing, you're absolutely right, David. But the thing that I've noticed with VR is like Don Hopper has one of those PCs out there. He has one of the highest spec machines, and we sometimes assign him to go check this thing out that people in our comments are freaking out about. Like go see what the Luke Ross mod looks like with with a whole bunch of graphics added, and he spends hours installing the mods, trying to get the capture up and running, and it doesn't necessarily work right as he's doing it, right? Like it's jank. You start introducing all the jank situations there on this super high-end machine. It's like, I love you, Don. Great job for doing that, and it looks great. But was it worth the 4 hours of tinkering at your machine to get those extra graphics?
Some of that is just performance, right? Again, it's sometimes just, that's why the march of graphics cards continues to push PC VR forwards. So let's just quickly talk about what AMD announced before we move on to our next topic. So that was Nvidia's offering. AMD have released far fewer details. They've just said that these are their 2 next generation cards using the RDNA 4 architecture, RX 9070 and 9070 XT. They have not released the price, but they have said that it is intended to compete with the 5070. So the lowest end of the cards we just talked about there, which is priced at, I think, $550. So at least for the start of this generation, AMD is not going for the $1,000, $2,000 GPU. They are saying we're going to compete in the affordable performance section. And the only spec we actually do know about these things yet is that they will both have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, but it is the previous generation GDDR6 VRAM. So compared to the 5070 that NVIDIA is offering, AMD is going to give you 4 extra gigabytes of VRAM, but it's slower VRAM. So that'll be a very interesting trade-off. And a lot of people are going to be wondering, right? Do I want the faster VRAM or more VRAM? And do I want the NVIDIA exclusive features or AMD's? Because AMD also talked about FSR4, which is their answer to DLSS4. And we'll have to see that. One final comment about this whole DLSS thing and FSR thing that we're seeing some debate about in the comments about, is AI upscaling good, and is this multi-frame generation valid? I would really recommend going to Digital Foundry and watching their analysis of DLSS4. As far as I'm aware, they're the only outlet that has been given access to it. They are the gold standard when it comes to this. Their video is embedded in our article, where we've linked to it there, and they showed that DLSS4 not just adds multi-frame generation, it also completely upgrades the underlying technology here to, instead of using a convolutional neural network, to use a transformer, and provides a massive quality improvement with far fewer artifacts. So I see some people in the comments saying, I don't like DLSS because of the artifacts and the ghosting. Well, go watch that Digital Foundry video, because it looks like they have dramatically improved all of that in DLSS 4.
All right. Well, I think we're getting close here to move to our last few subjects. On that last subject, as I'm using my Windows 11 PC here, I got an email last week to my request or comment for people to tell us tips that they have for more comfortable VR experiences, things that they look for. So I got an email out there from Tyler. So thank you to Tyler listening to us on YouTube or watching us out there. And they have a whole guide here that I'll get into probably once I receive a few other reports like this, because I've got some images of their tips and like the type of straps they've got set up. They said one of my favorite tips that they got in this email is they said, I look for head straps without a facial interface, or they want one with a removable facial interface, because they do not want pressure around my eyes, nor do I like to trap heat when using fitness apps. So I love those comments, and there's a whole big email here that I'll get into on some future episode. But tune back into UploadVR, and we'll get in here again with Don Hopper real soon as we go over everything he saw at CES out there, and then we'll be back with David next week or next Thursday with our regular VR download. But now we've got those two big subjects to get into here, right, David? Are you ready for this?
Yeah, yeah. I almost was about to say, don't do the sounds like an
No,
outro thing again. You're like,
I
oh,
know.
next week we're
I
coming back.
tried. I
No,
tried. I tried.
we've
You know,
got
I'm
two more
sorry. Yeah,
topics.
yeah.
Please
We're
don't
still.
tune out. So you got you within you always want to start doing an outro and you got to hold it back.
Oh, and David has the numbers floating out there right in the middle of our room. So the moment I misspeak or give an indication, we see the numbers drop. Both our hearts leap. Like, oh shit, he did it again. Right? Oh, sorry, I cussed. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah, so I'll let you cover this one because this is an article that we were talking earlier about the effort we put into this. This is something that I put in as a draft that was just kind of summarizing the existing coverage of this, and Ian really went to the work of taking that draft and turning it into original reporting by reaching out to the people involved here, getting original assets, and really finding out what actually went on here, because there's obviously always a little bit of loss in translation about how this goes from what really happened to the local news summary. So, Ian, why don't you walk us through what happened here and the significance?
Yeah, so this is going to be a fun one because I'm going to speak pretty informally about all this. So if I say something incorrect or I'm inaccurate because I've glossed over something, apologies, and we'll try to correct that in the future. But this was a case in Florida, the internet's favorite place in the world for shenanigans to happen. And a lawyer there basically made the case for his defendant that they should admit evidence into the case that was presented in VR. So basically, the lawyer is looking to present their clients a perspective, a portion of events on the night that they were arrested that aren't necessarily visible to a jury or a judge. They basically got a crime scene reconstruction person to come and make a scene, an animation, and then they got a portion of that animation built for VR headsets to show in a case. So this was a stand your ground hearing in Florida. So there's a law in the United States that basically suggests you can defend yourself with a gun in various situations, and there are this is so I went down a rabbit hole one night. So David turned this story in. I looked at it and I went and did my work on this story for most of a night. Spent a night researching this, trying to figure out Florida law and how it relates, and what was the actual status of the headsets of the case in which the headsets were used. So, like, where were they in this litigation? And this is a court case that happened before the jury. So this case hasn't gotten to the jury yet. This is a hearing before that. And it's up to the judge to decide whether this evidence basically gets any further in the case. The judge can still decide what happens in this case before then. And even the specifics of the case, like, I don't know, we kind of we hovered over it in the link. I didn't really want to get too into it in our write-up. I thought it was just the significance of this was the fact that a VR headset was used in the court, and the specifics of this case were secondary to that. Now, we went and contacted the lawyer who got this used in case, and I've got a whole Dropbox full of photos of the Quest cases being in the courtroom and then pulling them out and putting them on the various people in the courtroom to look at this, the scene that they had made for the defense. Is there anything else you want to add before I get to the larger idea here that this is sort of tugging at?
Sure. Just on the specifics, my understanding here is that, yeah, as you say, it's a stand your ground case in which the defendant is alleged to have pulled out a gun at a wedding, and they're trying to figure out whether that's okay. I'm not, American. I don't understand the kind of where the laws okay here, but my understanding here is that the defense has a virtual recreation that the judge watches from the defendant's point of view of the people at the wedding crowding around him aggressively in their narrative. This is the defense's narrative, that they're coming at him, all surrounding him, and that they are trying to say, here you are now in the eyes of this person, here you can see what it would feel like to have at this exact recreation, this virtual recreation of this wedding, what it would feel like to have these people aggressively come towards you and be cornered. And so feel like you're truly there in first person. Now, judge, don't you see it was totally fine for this guy to whip out a gun? That's my understanding of what's going on here.
I'm glad that you got to the end of that and then couldn't stop yourself from laughing, because I mean, there was a gun at a wedding, and that clearly would have had been upsetting for anyone involved. This, for the people who were in this room, this was not a laughing matter. But here's what happened. A video was shot at the wedding, filmed at the wedding by someone at the wedding, and it's on the other side of the room, pointed at this guy as he is walking back and forth with this gun. And there's the bride over there. There's people in wedding outfits all over the place, and there's a guy walking back and forth with this gun. And that video went viral, went on local media the night this guy was arrested. And the lawyer is out there saying, from then, there's a lawyer representing this guy saying that's not the whole story. The video you've seen is not the whole story. There's another perspective to show here. And wow, that's true. I mean, there is another perspective to show here, but both these perspectives are very heavy-handed, right? Like the video showing a guy walking back and forth with a gun at a wedding. Apparently, the backstory there is he wanted the wedding to end. It was his venue, and I think he wanted the event to end. Is I think the backstory there. And so, then you've got these two viewpoints, and it's go back 20, 30 years. You've got Star Trek: The Next Generation, A Matter of Perspective, where you have various. I went and watched that while I was writing this story and researching this. So if Don's still out there, any Star Trek fans, you'll remember that episode. That is the sci-fi equivalent very much of what is being attempted here.
Yeah, I mean, it does open up huge questions, right? Because if you have a CCTV video of an event admitted in court, then you're watching what a camera has recorded of an event without kind of an artist's opinion or kind of speculation, or even if someone was being malicious, as you're referencing in that Star Trek episode, manipulation. And the idea of using CGI, a computer-generated version of events, is not new. As far as I understand, this same defense lawyer used CGI as one of the first cases back in the 90s when he was a prosecutor. So he was using on a flat screen, a video of a computer-generated recreation, and that's something that is quite normal now in court. But this takes that to a whole new level, and it does open up really interesting questions, because if this does go to the next case and the jury are all sticking Quest 2s on their head and watching this virtual recreation, an artist and a team of developers created this recreation, right? So they are providing not what it truly felt like. This guy did not have a 360-degree camera on his head. They are recreating their perspective, their argument for what this looked like. And to what extent does that, for lack of a better word, manipulate the judge or jury's view of what happened and not let them arrive at their own conclusion? Because VR can be very visceral and make you feel like you are truly in that place, and give you a perspective that is much different than seeing something on a flat screen. There's been a lot of research that shows that, for example, people record memories of VR experiences in the same way. Their brain records it in the same way as a real event, which is not the case when you watch something on a TV or a monitor. Your brain records it as a kind of image, whereas something artistic, whereas this is recorded as a real memory. So could something in the jury or judge be persuaded by this visceral evidence that doesn't come across in some of the more traditional evidence? And could that lead to, a future where everyone is creating their own virtual reality version of their perspective of events that is completely biased? And you have the defense and the prosecution making their own version where almost like in a sort of sitcom TV show where they do a kind of cut between what one character thought happened and the other character thought happened. It's kind of almost comically different. And the Star Trek episode you reference is right on the nose of could that be used to convince people that what really happened was not what happened at all.
Yeah, so I'm in communication with the lawyer here and told them that we want to know anything that happens in this case, next steps, if it progresses, and they actually end up putting headsets on a jury. I picturing myself taking a train down the East Coast in an Apple Vision Pro the entire ride. I'll take a 20-hour ride down in my Apple Vision Pro, and then admit myself to the courtroom and go stand in the front row in my Apple Vision Pro and take a spatial video of the jury as they all don their Quest headsets, and see if I can get permission from the judge to do that, because I'd have to get probably special permission to bring a camera into this courtroom that is head worn. Rather, I don't know. There's a whole rabbit hole to go down, and we are already pondering it. So, and I like the one commenter out there who said that they made an animation that was considered inadmissible because it only showed one perspective, and that is where we are at this case. Is like the judge can make that decision here in the near future, to my understanding.
That is the big question, right? Where's the line going to be drawn here? Where is it admissible and inadmissible? My understanding is that Onakazi is in the UK, so it's going to be very different here than it is in America. And in America, my understanding is that state by state, it will potentially be different as well, unless something was appealed to the Supreme Court. That's my understanding. But
well, Danny's saying you ain't getting a camera in court. I mean, I've been in court with a camera to capture that, and I I took the pictures, and then the judge told us, "Oh wait, I forgot to tell you, no pictures," and then he started implementing those rules for us journalists. Journalism, the way they like, it's all up to the judge. Judge can decide whatever they want, but in lots of instances, they only allow one person into the room. That's called a pool reporter or pool journalist. So, like the Associated Press, they get selected from a hat between Reuters and AP. They're like, okay, who's the one today? And they pull the one out and they say, okay, it's AP. And then AP gets to come into the room with a camera, film everything, and then they submit those photos to the pool. So everyone gets access to the photos out of this agreement, because it's like a very fair way of doing this when a judge will only let one journalism outlet in the room. Well, I mean, why can't I go in and get my spatial video of the first use of quests in a court case? I'm ready, Your Honor, to fight this battle. Okay.
I hope you can. So, correction here, Onakazi is in Pennsylvania, and they said that this happened in 2007 or so. I'm going to read one comment here, a little bit lighter here, from Clayman, saying the real crime was that they used Quest 2. Yeah, you would wonder why, if you're trying to make this case and win this. Could you not afford the Quest 3, or did you start making this before Quest 3 came out?
So I did see someone asking us, did we see the animation itself? And so I requested that, basically, and I got this Dropbox folder with a bunch of the animations, but not the one that was basically formatted for the headset. And the irony here is, it might have been just a 360-degree or 180-degree video that was cut out of this animation. It could have even been a flat video cut for this, and shown in headset for this recreation. But I tried to get my hands on that because I did want to see it for myself, the actual thing that he tried in headset. I don't think I've seen that yet. I didn't get that in the file. Your Honor, I'm not a cat. I love that. Yeah, that's a good reference there for COVID.
The Zoom thing, yeah. I think we are ready to move on to talk about Sony's headset, unless there's anything you want to add.
No, that's it. Yeah, and good point on recording the jury. That's a whole different process there that will probably have different rules around recording, and yeah, definitely. And it's different state to state, but we will follow this up, and we will follow up future uses of VR in court cases. We definitely want to understand the methodology involved, and like I said, if the people only view this as a 360 video, gosh, what does it look like if you actually produce a full 3D reconstruction of a scene that's walk around. Like when do we cross that threshold, right? Of someone being paid to build that much of a reconstruction of a court case. So if that's you, if you're in the market for that, if you those are your business offerings, please let us know. tips@uploadvr.com. We want to hear more about it. All right.
I think what we can say for certain is that this is the first, as far as we're aware, but it's definitely not going to be the last, right? I think there are going to be a lot of attorneys and lawyers and law firms looking at this case to see what happens and coming up with their own VR strategy, which is crazy to say, but I think it's true, right?
Well, I that was my comment to the lawyer. Was I imagine it's up to one lawyer to get it in front of a jury, right? Like to get it through the entire process to have it affect the outcome of their case, and then you'll see rapid innovation in this space where like you have ready-made reconstruction people who are like, we're the best at making these reconstructions. We won 5 cases, that sort of thing.
I wonder when/if, but really when we're going to see this in a high-profile case. You know, the kind of case that is on the 24-hour news constantly. When, and whether it be some sort of feud between 2 celebrities or some sort of very famous crime with a celebrity in that sense, or something that shocks the nation. When will we see? And and now they're showing the jury their virtual reality recreation of their version of events. It could be a very strange new world we're set to enter in that sense.
Well, yeah, you can imagine defense experts brought to the stand to question the legitimacy of a recreation, right? So there's people saying, imagine AI reconstructing. Well, imagine people like us, experts in 3D space, or people in our audience who are experts in 3D reconstructions, who go tear down all the hallucinations that an AI might have introduced to the scene reconstruction. So there's a whole lot of paradigms here that have to be reestablished with all this new stuff. We are not recording spatial video, I don't think, over at CS. I guess Kyle could probably do that, but we're just doing, I think, regular stabilized high quality video. That's hard enough to send out from the wireless black hole that is the show floor at CES.
Yeah, I think, speaking of CES and speaking of UploadVR's Don Hopper right here at CES, let's talk about the Sony headset. So this thing was announced at last year's CES, and when we saw it then, it had 2 controllers. It had this little ring controller as well as this kind of held pointer. From Don's demo, it appears that they have gotten rid of the ring and they are now just using the pointer controller. That hasn't been confirmed, but I've seen other people who have tried this say the same thing, that the ring is no longer there in this 2025 revision. So if you missed what this is at all, again, this was announced last year. It is Sony's first standalone headset, but it is not from the PlayStation division of Sony. It is from the regular Sony Electronics. And it is focused on enterprise 3D creativity. So being used in films to visualize sets in 3D, being used in computer animated design to have, a floating version of the jet engine you're working on in front of you. And it features 4K per eye micro OLED displays, that same, high resolution display technology we keep talking about, that's in Apple Vision Pro, that's in these upcoming PC VR headsets. As well as the Snapdragon XR2 Plus Gen 2 chipset, which is the higher end version of the chip in Quest and Quest 3. This chip is also being used in Samsung's upcoming headset, that Android XR headset from Samsung. So it's got, as you can see, 4 traditional tracking cameras here, 2 pass-through cameras. It also has a very interesting flip-up design. So at any time, if you want to see a perfect view of the real world, you can just flip it up. There's been no pricing announced for this thing. There's been no specific release date, but they have given it a brand, XYN, pronounced Zin. But that's not just the brand for the headset. It also seems to be the brand for their whole kind of VR offering, and that includes this like motion capture studio thing that is coming with like a pro version of Mocopi that will allow, high fidelity motion capture using this tech, sometimes with the headset, sometimes not. So we kind of see a picture of where Sony is coming into this market. They want to focus really, really strongly on creativity, 3D creation, film sets, that kind of thing, with a headset that is likely going to cost on the order of $2,000, if not more, and a controller that is specifically designed for 3D manipulation in space, as well as a headset that people can be on their desk using their CAD program, click a button, and have the CAD model float in space, and then flip the headset up and go back to the PC if they need. We'll keep a close eye on how Sony progresses, where they kind of adjust here. I think what a lot of our audience are interested in is, are they going to, in future years, move from this enterprise creativity market into a consumer market with a standalone? And I think that's what Ian is obviously going to be really focused on finding out as well.
Yeah, this controller was very interesting, very, very interesting to watch Don basically interview someone from Sony and then put the headset on in real time and try this controller and put the flip headset on in real time. And it's honestly, it's less than a minute from him just like holding the headset in his hands to picking up an object and moving it from place to place. And as he learns in his initial gesture, as we've reported out on the article for this, is it's just a slight little gesture similar to a mouse movement to really do big movements in VR. And it's interesting to see that as the centerpiece of Sony's offering here. But the Ring, so seeing the Ring controller not there is interesting. And then there's this question of just how many people does Sony reach with this hardware? And then is there a bigger market that they can achieve with their software platform shipping on other people's hardware? So like, can you imagine this controller or not this controller used with an Apple Vision Pro with the Zyn software platform, software suite running on the Apple Vision Pro? Is that something feasible? And that's what I keep seeing as I sort of see Don I wasn't blown away by this headset when I saw it last year, and I didn't get that vibe from Don that he was blown away by it either. And just comparing that to the idea that, yeah, I do need creativity tools. There's a emptiness when it comes to creativity tools on Apple Vision Pro.
It's a really interesting point. Like, why specifically is this hardware? I guess it's because, like, right now you can't just get a 4K micro OLED standalone headset that's not, from Apple or from like a Chinese company that companies aren't going to be willing to use. Samsung's headset, I guess, is going to be similar to this in many ways, right? They're using the same chipset, the same resolution of displays, if not the same displays. Why wouldn't Sony just come up to Samsung and say, we have a controller, we have a software suite? Some of that software is coming in a partnership with Siemens, by the way. Siemens, I think is how that's pronounced, the industrial giant. So they're kind of also working on that CAD software solution. We're in this point where it's really confusing as to what exactly Sony is doing. And a lot of the press release and the marketing and the conference at CES are very vague. And I think companies do this when they don't really know what they're doing yet, when they're kind of just doing the shotgun scatterblast method of, why don't we just throw a bunch of stuff out here and see what sticks? And yeah, I guess for now, this is going to be a hardware offering combined with their software. But as you say, it seems like it would make more sense over time for this to be software. But then again, I kind of come back on myself and think, for a company, if you're a business, if you're like, making jet engines, I always use that example, and you want to get like a headset to do this kind of 3D collaborative visualization where you're all standing in the room in mixed reality, seeing a high quality, 4K OLED version of that CAD model being streamed from the PC to the headset out into mixed reality. Do you want to have to say, oh yeah, I'm going to go and buy, this headset and use your software? Or do you want to just go to Sony and say, give us the full solution, give us everything? Sony has full understanding of the hardware. My understanding is that, Don is using this right now in PC VR mode, and this is a PC VR link cable. We don't know the tech details of this yet. Is this DisplayPort in over USB-C? Is this headset getting like a raw native image? We do understand that they did talk about wireless PC streaming. So it does look like they're actually doing things like bit streaming of the models, not just an entire frame, but the headset's handling the mixed reality. Then they're kind of compositing in the PC rendered CAD model. yeah, so it may be that for now they need that kind of hardware software integration, whereas maybe in future they do move on. The last thing I wonder though is Sony was mentioned as one of the companies that are building an Android XR product. Is this that? Is this running Android XR? Again, they are so light on details, so heavy on marketing fluff for now.
Yeah, it's like I try. This is the, straight into conjecture, sort of like conspiracy theory territory, to try to figure out what is happening behind closed doors at this. Like, why is this the shape that it is? It's very hard to tell. And I appreciate James O'Loughlin sort of hinting or guessing here. He's thinking that doubt this or other Android XR headsets will launch by end of year, to be honest. And that's what feels really strange or problematic here, right? Like, we described it earlier in the show. It is within Apple's power this year to ship Vision OS 3 and a new version of Watch OS and a new watch bands that do all the things we talked about earlier in the show, where like you grab a flight stick and you move it around and you get a haptic effect when you touch the instrumentation. Like, sorry, my headset just went weird with a whole bunch of apps popping up. Um, the You could do that within Apple's ecosystem if Apple chose to do it, right? Like if they pull all their ducks in a row and pull them all together, it's this close. How does Sony get anywhere close to that with this scattershot relationship to users, right? Like they don't have a whole lot of wearable presence. Like they don't. Sony wearables aren't the must-wear products of the 2020s, right? Like maybe that they had Walkman back in the 80s and stuff like that, but that's not the brand they are today. Apple is very close to that brand. Samsung is close to that brand. Google is close to that brand. Sony doesn't have that sort of thing. And I don't know. Like, I don't know how Sony pulls this all together. Now, Android XR, I went and tried out their headset uh, late last year with just at the end of the year, they showed this off. And it was the same concept. It felt like a concept demo. Like, let's show off our ideas of where we want this to go. And that was Gemini over your shoulder helping you with everything you look at. And it didn't work perfectly during my demo. It got a bunch of questions wrong just from asking it around things around my room. And then Google Maps. That's the other thing that I have to bring back. Like, Google Maps was incredible on Android XR, and it's powerful enough that you can imagine Google Maps being the basis of an entire operating system. Like, I want Google Maps in every single app. I want to be able to go look at the map of everything I'm looking at. It's that much of a quality experience. But how do you get Google Maps together with games, together with a production workflow, together with input schemes? How do you get all of that lined up and hope to compete with Apple when they're firing on all cylinders?
Yeah, well, I think there was a comment here saying that, Samsung and Sony and these companies don't really know where they want to be in the market. And I think they're starting narrow and then they'll widen out. So I think the answer for Sony right now for their standalone headset is they don't get games, right? This is going to be sold not to individuals, but to companies. This is going to be sold to, Fortune 500 companies that are looking to use VR in their design process, or Hollywood studios that want to use VR to visualize their sets. Like, as we talked about at the time, The Lion King, they had a Unreal Engine real-time version of that virtual set that they were able to kind of frame everything in. That's the kind of use case that Sony's going after here. But let's get speculative for a minute. Let's say this thing does work and they say, you know what, the next version, or this, a future version of this version, let's move into the consumer market too. And let's say this does run Android XR. That's not confirmed, but it seems likely. Then they do have all of those Google services. Well, maybe they say that the reason to get theirs over Samsung's is that you can play all of your PS5 games streamed on your Wi-Fi network on a giant virtual ultra-wide screen, right? Or, maybe even they start using 3D. And then, of course, you can buy the PlayStation VR 2 controllers separately, as it's rumored that Sony will do with Vision Pro. Maybe they do that for this thing in a future consumer version, and you can play PlayStation VR 2 wirelessly on the headset, keeping in mind that if they are, this architecture of micro OLED means they're going to be north of $1,000, most likely on the order of $2,000. It still could be something that they say, in the same way that Vision Pro offers this at a premium today that will be affordable one day, we're going to do that same thing. We really don't know what Sony is going to do here, but it's clear that they at least have an intention to enter the industry if we don't know the details yet.
I like Danny's comment here, and I think we're ready to end this show here after, I don't know, a 3-hour episode and lots of new members joining our website and on YouTube. Thank you all to your support. I do want to talk about these last comments, though. I love Danny saying, Quentin first saying, I'll never understand the thought that VR will replace TVs. TVs are communal. Why would I buy 2 VR headsets for my wife and I so I can watch a movie together when we can just watch the TV we have? I have an answer for that. That's a good criticism, but also there is an answer for that. And then Danny's reply, they won't replace TVs, but I like the idea of having screens where I like without my wife cutting off a part of my body.
I wonder how to say that one out loud.
Yeah, I know, right? So the Quentin comment and the communal thing. So over Christmas break, I pulled up Wicked in 3D and laid it over the 2D version of the video playing in sync on my television. So my wife watched Wicked in 2D on our flat screen television, and I watched Wicked in 3D overlaid on top of the television, twice as large and in higher resolution with a better picture in 3D Wicked at the same time. My wife had closed captions on because she loves having the audio to help her on the closed captions, seeing what's going on. I don't like that distraction on most things, and especially if I've got good audio. And we watched the same thing synced. The other day, yesterday or the day before, I had my Steam Deck out, and Steam Deck now has Chrome that you can run pretty easily on it. I got Netflix up and running on it. I pulled up Interstellar. I had Interstellar running on my Steam Deck on its little 800 wide screen or whatever. But then I Steam linked it to my Vision Pro and had it as a giant screen right here, which maybe I sacrificed a little bit on the resolution, but it looked great. It ended up looking fantastic. And I made it a giant screen here. And the thing about that setup is that Steam Link could have been probably mirrored another time in another place of my house. So what we had in that specific scenario was someone could have, I could have share played my Steam Link window remotely to someone else, while someone in the same room watches Interstellar on my Steam Deck. I watch Interstellar on Steam Link locally, streaming what's on that screen. And then I've pulled in a third remote person who is watching my virtual screen as well. That's the dream. And that won't replace TVs overnight, but there are plenty scenarios where I don't need a bedroom TV anymore because my wife doesn't want the bedroom TV and I'm happy with the Vision Pro.
Yeah, I think that bedroom TV is the case that I think is more what we're talking about here. I accept that, yes, you can do what you're saying. I think for the majority of people, we're not talking about replacing televisions. We're talking about we're not talking about replacing the television in your living room. But if you look at the statistics behind this, the percentage of time that people spend in their bedroom alone watching a bedroom TV or Netflix on their laptop or tablet, or even when everyone's in the family room and watching the TV, how many people are on their phone on TikTok or on their Steam Deck or Nintendo Switch doing something completely different? That is enormous. A huge percentage of watching today and gaming is done alone. And a lot of people live alone, right? More people than ever before live alone. So yes, a physical television, I think, will still for a very, very long time be the best way to watch things together in a room. And we're not talking about replacing that. But how many in a typical family, how many children have a bedroom in their TV or a TV in their bedroom? And how many, if they don't have one, will watch on their tablet or their laptop? And how many students are in their room in, accommodation and sitting there on their laptop or tablet or even just their phone watching something. That's the kind of thing where they can go from this tiny screen held in their hand or on their lap to an enormous cinema screen, as well as, of course, the fact that lots of people who are supposedly watching something together are already off in their own little reality.
Yeah, so Robert Quinone is doing what a lot of people are doing out there, and other people talking about Discord. Yes, the movie parties are started. They're already happening. People are doing movie parties out there in VR, in their Discord groups, private chat groups, FaceTime groups. It's happening. It's hard to do. It's a pain. It's a pain. Like what everyone in our software is talking about, or everyone in our comments is talking about, is a software problem instituted, not the least, by multiple layers of DRM, right? 4 layers of DRM, depending on the way you're watching that video. And you want to get other people to like watch it with you over the internet. That's a pain in the butt, and it's not easy to do. And you're sure, if you've gotten a letter from someone for using a file sharing service in the last 30 years, you can understandably be a little bit scared of trying to do anything that doesn't have the buy-in of the movie studios. So like, it's still happening, right? Even though you don't have the buy-in of the movie studios, people are still holding their movie watch parties, despite it being a horrible, horrible software experience.
Yeah, well, the great thing about Vision OS and Apple Vision Pro is that you don't have to do any of these workarounds. SharePlay means that if you both own the content and you both have the rights to the content, such as you're both Disney Plus subscribers, you can watch it together. And one of the things we're going to keep a close eye on in 2025 is, when does that come to the MetaQuest platform as well? When can people get $300 or $500 headsets and legally, officially, and conveniently, in a couple of clicks, completely standalone, watch movies together? Or, of course, when does Apple come out with a headset that's much more affordable to allow this to be done at a wider scale?
So I love our comments. Everyone talking about all the different arrangements. I do like No's comment here saying the bedroom TV is why I have neck problems. Check your posture, guys. And yeah, do check your posture as you're in VR for extended lengths of time. My Apple Watch gives me a vibration every hour to remind me to stand up. So keep that in mind as you're going into VR for extended periods, no matter where you are. But I love that comment of bedroom TVs and the placement, right? There's a subreddit for TVs too high, right? Like that will legitimately, yeah, that will legitimately mess you up. And right, VR is a solution for that. It's like, oh, you put the TV exactly where you want. Cuddle your pet. Get your cat into a nice little cuddle, and then put the screen right on the other side of the cat. You're good to go. All right. Let us know if you've got any tips for using VR for longer. We'll get into that in the future. I love those emails. You can email tips@uploadvr.com. You can also email Ian at uploadvr.com. I think Don is Don@uploadvr.com. You're D Heaney at uploadvr.com? Yeah. So dheaney@uploadvr.com. Email us. We might not be able to respond, but we do see your comments. We do see everything you send us, and it helps inform us. We've been able to cover things because of those emails. We were able to stay on Meta for the MetaQuest 2 bricking incident over Christmas because of all of those emails, and you just keep them coming. We've got a big year ahead. Thank you all for this marathon episode. I am ready to get out of VR. You ready to get out of VR, David?
I'm ready to get out of VR. Thank you so much, everyone, for your discussion. It's great to have you here on a live show. We very much so hope we'll be here at the same time next week, live, to talk about whatever breaks in the next few days, or maybe something's broken already and we're going to go straight to Slack and find out that we have some articles to write.
Oh God, no. Yeah, I've been trying to keep it on the view over there. I like the productions about. I've been on a portable kick lately. Oh my gosh, you're speaking my language. We could have a 3-hour discussion just on the portability stuff that I've been messing with. I'm a Game Boy kid at heart, right? My Game Boy was my first personal computer, and I've gone through the entire process of, right, like how I'm still keeping the feeling of Game Boy alive here in 2025. I've finally come to that realization that VR headset is just what my Game Boy was in 1980. Just now I can have a million Game Boys, right? So yeah, there's a lot of tricks for portability. And if you have any tips or tricks for portable usage of VR, let me know. I want to hear about it. So we'll see you later.
We need a 6-hour solo show of you in the solo studio talking to the members about this.
Right. No, I'm ready. I'll talk to the members. I have 2 Game Boy cameras set up right now facing at me, running on an analog pocket and on a mod retro chromatic. And I have both of those Game Boy cameras feeding into my PCs. It's the stupidest thing. But I love it because my webcams are from the 1980s. All right. Or 1990s. All right. I'll see you later.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week.